Welcome back to Grimoire Audiobooks. Today, we dive into Part 4, Chapters 31 to 40 of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time, a hilarious and imaginative fanfiction by Sarah 1281. This story takes Harry's time-turning antics to a whole new level, blending witty humor with a brilliantly chaotic plot. As the timeline spirals into delightful absurdity, alliances shift, secrets unfold, and the wizarding world faces scenarios that will leave you laughing and gasping in equal measure. Sarah 1281 is celebrated for her sharp wit and ability to breathe fresh life into the Harry Potter universe. With stories like Oh God, Not Again, Sarah redefines what fanfiction can achieve, making readers laugh while crafting engaging and unique narratives. Disclaimer: this fanfiction is a transformative work inspired by J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. All original characters, settings, and trademarks belong to their respective owners. This audiobook is created purely for entertainment purposes, with no copyright infringement intended. If you're enjoying this magical journey, don't forget to like, comment, and share. With 25 likes and 25 comments, the next chapter-packed installment will be on its way to you. So, sit back, relax, and prepare for another whirlwind adventure through time with Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281, here at Grimoire Audiobooks. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more magical tales. Chapter 31. It occurred to Harry later that he really could have handled the picture situation a lot better than he did. For instance, he could have blown the camera up, petrified Draco, used a switching spell, summoned it, basically anything but what he did, which was absolutely nothing. Draco, on the other hand, sent the photo of the Boggart Strait to Rita Skeeter, who wrote Dungeons and Drag, The Secret Life of Harry Potter, which wasn't just an article, but a series of articles. Harry, naturally, had responded by suing for libel and won, forcing the Daily Prophet to print a retraction. The wizarding world at large seemed to have forgotten about it by early October, but the Hogwarts students— "Hey Harry," Lisa Turpin, a Ravenclaw from his year, greeted him. "I was wondering if you could sign my new Harry and Drag wall scrolls?" "Draco's selling wall scrolls now?" Harry asked incredulously. "Oh yeah," Lisa nodded enthusiastically. "He said he got the idea from you and your incessant merchandising you've been doing since last year." "Damn him," Harry muttered, wondering whether he should drop that Narcissa the Secret Malfoy rumor after all, or whether he really deserved this for the widely accepted Snape has Draco's father story he created. In fact, Sirius said that just last week Snape had gotten a letter from a lawyer offering to help him sue for partial custody of Draco. Needless to say, the potions master was not amused. Fortunately, he'd been riding so high ever since Rita Skeeter's first article came out that this new drop in mood just meant he was pretty much back to normal. "So, will you?" Lisa asked again. "Oh, fine, whatever," Harry sighed as he took out his decidedly muggle pen and quickly signed it. "Thanks, Harry, you're a good sport," Lisa said cheerfully as she hurried away. "Do you think I can persuade you to sign them before I sell them?" Draco's voice came from behind him. Harry turned around to watch the Slytherin staring at him with obvious amusement. "It would probably be worth more. Would I get a cut in the profits?" Harry asked automatically. 10%, Draco offered. 20, Harry countered. 15, Draco compromised. "Deal," Harry smiled. "Now you've got to tell me, why in the world were you in the teacher's lounge that day? I mean, were you stalking me or something? Or do you just take pictures of Hogwarts in your spare time?" "I ran into Professor Snape a little after potions class," Draco explained. "He told me to get a camera and hurry to the teacher's lounge. I didn't have one, so I had to borrow Pansy's dash." "Pansy has a camera?" Harry interrupted. "I thought that was only Colin." Draco rolled his eyes. "Pansy has apparently decided to follow your entrepreneurial example and has taken it upon herself to write a book for parents and new students, particularly Muggleborns, about what to expect, what the castle's like, and the classes, and she's including a lot of pictures." "Man, I wish I thought of that." Harry trailed off. "But wait," Both of your families are ridiculously wealthy. Why would you even need to make money? Why would you? Draco shot back. You're independently wealthy as well. Yeah, but you guys don't throw around money like I do, and your parents are still around to find ways to accumulate more wealth, Harry pointed out. Draco shrugged. What can I say, Potter? It's nice to have some readily available cash without needing to go through your parents, and Hogwarts can be really boring. But like I was saying, Professor Snape told me to go to the teacher's lounge, and I suppose he thought I could get a picture of your worst fear, or you looking terrified, but this worked out so much better, don't you think? For you, maybe, Harry muttered. Draco just smirked and walked away. As Harry waited impatiently for the line to leave the castle and go to Hogsmeade to shorten, he noticed a disturbance at the beginning of the line. Upon closer examination, it appeared that Lavender was crying and Parvati, Seamus, and Dean were attempting to comfort her. What's wrong? Harry asked as he, Ron, Neville, and Hermione approached them. She got a letter from home this morning, Parvati whispered. It's her rabbit, Binky. He's been killed by a fox. Oh, Hermione said. I'm so sorry, Lavender. I should have known, Lavender angst. You know what day it is? The 16th of October? Neville helpfully supplied. The day that Professor Trelawney said something bad would happen to you? Lavender nodded and sighed tragically. And not just that, I also got my period today. You know what? Harry said, feeling uncomfortable. I think I forgot my money in my room. Coming, Ron? Neville. Dear God, yes, Ron said, practically pushing Harry towards the Gryffindor Tower. We'll go with you. Dean jumped in. Oh yeah, I think I forgot something as well, Seamus said. The moment the 5 boys were out of sight, they hid behind a wall. Psst, Ginny, Harry called out as he saw the girl in question walking by. What are you guys doing? She asked, walking up to them. We're hiding from Lavender because she's talking to Parvati and Hermione about girl things, Harry explained. And so you're hiding, Ginny said, shaking her head in disgust.
Boys.
What do you want me to do? Let you know when it's safe to come out? That would be great, Harry nodded. All right, Ginny agreed. If you buy me a box of Honeydukes chocolate. Hell, if you let us know when they leave so we can avoid them for the rest of the day, I'll buy you 5. Ginny smiled at the thought and, after a few more minutes passed by, let them know it was safe to go. Thanks, Ginny. You're a lifesaver, Harry said gratefully as they got back in line. With the kind of heroics you get up to, it doesn't surprise me that you would think that, Ginny replied idly. Since Hagrid's first lesson was such a resounding success, even if it did ultimately result in Draco's photo revenge that he was still milking for all it's worth, he continued showing them exciting and rather dangerous creatures. Fortunately, Hermione managed to convince him to let them know in advance what they were going to be studying, and everyone always made sure to be well prepared as doing otherwise could easily land them in the hospital wing. Potions was much the same as it had always been, with the exception that Neville was not putting a lot more effort into a class he knew he wasn't good at because he was worried that Snape would try to poison Trevor again with his potions if he screwed them up. Professor Trelawney seemed convinced that Harry, or rather his facial disfigurement, was a true prodigy and often let him off with less homework as he apparently did not need the extra help to establish his connection to his inner eye since he was already using it on a regular basis. Vaguely, Harry tried to remember the first time he'd used his scar excuse. He was fairly certain it was only supposed to be a one-time thing, so he could do whatever he wanted/needed to do without having to bother with explanations for his future knowledge, but somehow, well, it was convenient. And he thought maybe the first time he bothered with that was when he went off to go blow Voldemort's cover his first year. Sirius and Remus, both interesting if unorthodox teachers, had begun competing to see which class the students preferred. Sirius, of course, always had amusing lectures and answered whatever question anyone threw at him, but Remus kept bringing in nice and non-lethal dark creatures. The end result, of course, was that history of magic and defense against the dark arts were both more exciting than they'd been in years. Or possibly ever, as Fred and George kept insisting that Binns had actually been hired by the founders of Hogwarts themselves. Of course, that was highly unlikely, but since when had that ever stopped the rumor mill? Harry, Sirius's voice jolted him out of his thoughts. Yes? Harry asked. I couldn't help but notice that you received a postcard this morning. Read it, set it on fire, then tried to set the ashes on fire. Care to tell me what that's all about? Sirius sounded rather amused. Harry rolled his eyes. Lockhart wrote to say his new book's done. He's dedicating it to me, and to remember that there's no such thing as bad publicity. Sirius laughed. Well, for a man who's determined to make people remember him, I guess there wouldn't be. Is this about the posters? Of course it's about the posters, Harry snapped. Draco sells them to whoever walks by, and yet has somehow managed to convince people that they're a collector's item. Are people really that stupid? Do I really need to answer that? Sirius asked rhetorically. Since when is Draco so good at this kind of thing, anyway? Harry complained. That's just what you get for pissing off Narcissa, Sirius commiserated. She is a scary, scary lady. How do you think Lucius managed to stay out of Azkaban? Besides, this will all blow over soon enough. It's not that funny. Strangely enough, Harry didn't look comforted. You have 3 hanging in your classroom. Sirius was unrepentant. They're some of my only pictures of you, seeing as how I so cruelly abandoned you for most of your life. I knew those going to come back and haunt me sooner or later, Harry grumbled. Cheer up, I'm off to go plot revenge against Snively with Remus, Sirius said cheerfully. Wanna come? Why not? Harry agreed as they set off to find the werewolf in question. Remus, are you busy? Sirius asked, barging right into Remus's office. Incredibly so, Sirius, Remus answered without looking up. 2 of the 3rd year's care of magical creatures textbooks attempted to eat their homework, and I'm trying to decipher it. Wow, Harry remarked. My book ate my homework. I don't think I've heard that one before. Hello, Harry, Remus greeted. Do you need some things? Oh, so you have time for him, but not for me? Sirius asked, wounded. He's a student, Sirius. That makes him my responsibility, Remus explained patiently. Do you have a way for everyone to have completely forgotten all about Neville's stupid boggart? Harry asked. Nothing legal, came Remus's simple reply. Now that we're all here, let the weekly meeting of the Drive Snively to the brink of insanity come to order, Sirius said grandly. Harry raised an eyebrow. DSBI. It's better than spew, Sirius said defiantly. I told you, Sirius. I'm not going to help you. I'm Remus began. An adult? Responsible? Not holding a decade-long grudge. Harry supplied helpfully. Yes. To all of those things, Remus agreed. Sirius shot them a withering look. Oh, shut up. Now, since we last met, that git did conspire to turn me into a Vila. Fortunately, the effect wore off at 48 hours because most of my new fangirls were underage. In return, I may have turned his nose into a beak and enchanted every reflective surface he came across to give him hygiene tips. This was all very good, but now there's a new week, so we need a new plan. Sirius waited for a moment, but Harry and Remus stayed silent. Well, you told us to shut up, Remus said mildly as Harry tried to see if he could read Remus's paperwork upside down. I didn't actually expect you to listen, Sirius said impatiently. So, ideas? You could decorate his classroom with pictures of yourself in drag, Harry muttered. I don't quite think that would have the desired effect, Sirius said, writing it down anyway. Remus? You could try acting like a responsible member of society and not reviving this petty rivalry, Remus suggested. Sirius just stared at him. Wow. You are really bad at this. I'm never leaving you alone for 12 years again. Whatever makes you happy, Sirius, Remus said serenely. That's a good philosophy, Sirius smiled. I think more people should adopt it. Chapter 32. What do you mean we're playing Hufflepuff instead of Slytherin tomorrow? Harry asked incredulously. Draco's not sick or injured or anything. Oliver Wood coughed. Actually, my sources tell me that he accidentally cast a reducto on his wrist, and since Madame Pomfrey has to regrow several of his bones, he won't be in any shape for the match tomorrow. Wow, Harry said almost admiringly. That's dedication. Completely stupid since it's only a little rain, and will be similarly hampered, but still, have you ever had all your bones regrown? The fact he'd do that on purpose, just wow, I know, Wood reluctantly agreed. If it weren't for the fact that I don't want all of our multi-weather training to be for nothing, I'd suggest you do the same thing. Gotta go, Harry said, sprinting for the relative safety of his defense against the dark arts class. Sorry I'm late, Professor Lupin. I was dealing with a Quidditch fanatic, and these things take time. This lesson began 10 minutes ago, Potter, so I think we'll make it 10 points from Gryffindor. Sit down, Remus said coldly. Harry brightened as he always did at the rare chance to lose house points. So, that's a point a minute? Remus nodded uncertainly. So can I use come back in an hour or so? Or hell Monday? How many points would that be? Harry trailed off, trying to figure it out. Remus's lips curled into an unpleasant smile. Tempting as that may be, I have no inclination to spend time with you outside of class supervising your detention, and if I don't then God knows your godfather will probably spend the time taking you to the kitchens or Hogsmeade or something. True, Harry conceded. Are you feeling all right? I mean, you're acting kind of, oh my god, isn't tonight the dash? Indeed it is, Remus confirmed, irritated. So you're Professor Snape, who my godfather made look like Professor Lupin for whatever reasons? Harry hazarded a guess. He thought it would be an easier transition for the students, Snape confirmed dourly. Now sit down. As I was saying before Potter interrupted, Professor Lupin has not left any records of the topics you have covered so far dash, Snape began before Harry interrupted him yet again. I have no idea what we're on, but since there isn't any lesson plan, can we take the time to learn about werewolves? Snape's eyes widened. That's an interesting request, Potter. Any particular reason? Harry knew Snape was surprised as the older man was obviously half-heartedly trying to get someone to realize about Remus, because he was annoyed at having to fill in, and because Remus hadn't done anything to stop Sirius acting like a prat and pranking him regularly. Not like Snape wasn't giving as good as he got, and it wasn't as if Snape wasn't totally planning on covering it anyway, so why not? The widespread ignorance about lycanthropy is appalling. Did you know that people actually believe that werewolves live in the Forbidden Forest and you can run into one at any time, or that it's possible to raise a werewolf cub as if it were a pet? Harry shook his head sadly. As any muggle could tell you, werewolves only transform on the full moon. But Harry, Hermione protested. We were about to start Hinky Punks. If Professor Lupin wanted you to start Hinky Punks today, then he should have left a lesson plan, Snape pointed out. I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but Potter's idea has merit. It is truly a sad state of affairs when muggles know more about magical creatures than wizards do. Let's start with an easy question, Snape said. Can any of you other than Miss Granger, who has most likely memorized the textbook, tell me how you distinguish between the werewolf and the true wolf? Dean Thomas, bolstered by the fact that as a muggle-born he at least understood about the full moon, made use of that fact. A true wolf is around as a wolf all the time versus the once-a-month werewolves. Anything that we haven't already said? Snape tried again. If we get close enough to see the difference, then doesn't that mean that if it's a werewolf we're screwed anyway? Harry asked innocently. Potter, yelled Snape. Oh, right, I memorized the textbook. Sorry, Harry apologized. When no other answers were forthcoming, Snape tooted softly. I never thought I'd meet a third-year class who wouldn't even recognize a werewolf when they saw one. Even Lockhart got that across in his book on werewolves. I'm just saying, I don't think I can ever forgive you, Harry said solemnly. I said I was sorry, Cedric insisted. And it's not like I knew. You should have, Harry crossed his arms sullenly. I mean, for the love of God. Dementors come out of nowhere and swarm the field, and I heroically save everyone by casting a kick-ass Patronus, and the next thing I knew you had caught the snitch. I didn't notice they were there, Cedric tried to explain. How could you not notice? Harry asked skeptically. There was very poor visibility, Cedric defended. Harry just stared. But didn't you wonder about the sudden feeling of hopelessness? I thought it was because you guys were 50 points ahead and the storm was only getting worse, said Cedric. Fine, stick to your story. But you and I both know the truth, Harry said dramatically. Yes, and so does everyone else, Cedric said slowly, trying to keep calm. Here are your winnings, Harry. Luna arrived, Ginny trailing along behind her. Winnings? Cedric asked, surprised. But you lost the match. Harry made Luna bet that he would lose the match due to Dementa intervention, and the students, who really should know better than to take a seemingly ridiculous bet from Harry by now, just lost quite a bit of money, Ginny explained. Why didn't you do it yourself instead of using a proxy? Cedric inquired. Harry rolled his eyes. Please. The minute I bet against Gryffindor, they'll accuse me of throwing the match. But there were Dementors, Cedric pointed out. They would probably accuse Harry of bringing them, Luna said. I still don't quite understand why Dementors are so pro-Hufflepuff, though. I should write an article about it. You should, Harry agreed. I'll help. So, Ginny, since I just heroically saved everyone, does that mean my hero street cred just rose? It might, Ginny said thoughtfully. If it weren't for the fact that the teachers can probably produce a Patronus as well, and you made a lot of money on this. Harry decided to take the opportunity to be melodramatic. Why do you hate me when all I give you is love? Ginny just rolled her eyes. Why would you bet on something so ridiculous anyway? My scar told me to, Harry explained. Your scar knew there would be Dementors, Ginny repeated. No idea. I didn't ask, Harry said breezily. Then why'd you do it? Ginny demanded. Because I have money to burn? Harry guessed. Why me? Ginny asked, annoyed. Would you mind if I interviewed you for the Quibbler? Luna asked Cedric. The Hufflepuff looked surprised. I guess not. Why, though? It's part of my investigation, Luna told him. A good reporter never goes into a story with any assumptions, so I need to determine if the Dementors were really supporting Hufflepuff in general, or if they just like you. You think the Dementors like me? Cedric repeated. Is that good? Oh no. Luna shook her head vehemently. If they like you, then they want to take your soul. If you cannot already produce a corporal Patronus like Harry, then I recommend you ask Professor Lupin to teach you. Cedric nodded. I think I'll do that. And, of course, there's always the matter of if the Dementors are rebelling against the Ministry of if someone from the Ministry itself sent them. With the great pictures I bought from Colin and Pansy, this may even make the front page. Luna exclaimed. May make. Harry asked. What were you planning to put on the front page? Luna smiled happily. It's Norbert's birthday. Don't you think you're being a little melodramatic? Harry asked, watching Oliver would attempt to drown himself in the sink. No, Wood muttered. But there's not even enough water in there for you to drown in, Harry pointed out. Wood's hand reached for the tap. Don't you dare. Harry swatted it away. Do you have any idea how hard it would be to find a keeper this late in the season? We'd probably have to end up using Ron. Is he any good? Wood asked, still valiantly trying to drown. Harry shrugged. He has some real talent, but he freezes up when other people are watching, lets them play mind games with him to distract him from the game, and I really don't want to see what would happen if he were on the same team as the twins. Point, Oliver acknowledged. Besides, who on earth would be captain? Angelina could do it, Wood suggested. Look, I know I'm amazing and all, but this is the first time in 3 years I've lost a match. We won the cup 2 years running. Harry reminded him. But we lost this match, Oliver sighed. I think this falls under the category of act of God, Harry declared. I mean, I'm good, but there's really nothing I can do if Cedric happens to spot the snitch, while I'm in the middle of saving everyone from the Dementors. Oliver didn't reply. Look on the bright side, Harry said cheerfully. At least we were playing Hufflepuff. If it were Slytherin, then I would never hear the end of it from Draco. At the next defense against the dark arts lesson, Harry peered very carefully into the room before entering it. Yeah, it looked like the teacher standing in the front of the room was Remus, but it had last time, too. The full moon was over with, but Remus would still be out of sorts. Harry decided to test it out. Feeling better? He asked. I am. Thank you, Harry, Remus said. I can't believe you left Snape in charge, Harry said, shaking his head. It was either that or Sirius, Remus explained. I guess I see your point, Harry admitted. But still, what happened? Remus asked, looking concerned. You'll see, was all Harry would say. Professor Lupin? Ron asked. Yes. Remus smiled at him. Do you still want those werewolf essays? Ron asked. Remus frowned slightly. You were supposed to write an essay about werewolves? Did you tell Professor Snape we hadn't covered them yet? I tried to, Hermione huffed. But he said that if you wanted us to cover Hinkypunks, you should have left a lesson plan, and Harry suggested studying werewolves. Harry met Remus's questioning stare and shrugged. The rampant misconceptions were annoying me. Apparently, they annoyed Professor Snape, too. As I heard, he made every class he filled in for do an essay. Don't worry, Professor Lupin said calmly. I'll speak to Professor Snape. You don't have to do the essay. But it's due today, so we already did it, Seamus pointed out. Oh, well, since not every class had been assigned it, I can't very well make it an assignment. Remus looked a bit uncomfortable. So, in other words, just turn it into Snape's? Neville asked. Why would we do that? Parvati asked. He teaches potions. Yeah, but he assigned the essay, and if we don't give it to him, what do you think will happen to our potions grades? Neville asked. Not to mention, he might appreciate a sign that we think he'd be an okay defense against the dark arts teacher, Harry agreed. Of course we do. There don't really seem to be any qualifications for the position. Sorry, Professor, Lavender said sheepishly. Don't worry about it. Now, for the lesson you should have been covering on Friday, Hinkypunks. So, Hermione, did you find out anything interesting when you were writing that werewolf essay? Harry asked his friend as they sat outside by the Black Lake. Or, at least that was what Harry thought it was called. Who really knew? Most people referred to it simply as the lake. Snively assigned you an essay on werewolves? Sirius, who had been on his way to Hagrid's, stopped short and stared at them. At Harry's nod, he continued. Right. This time I think I'm actually going to kill him. Hermione looked alarmed by this. Be because of the essay? Does that mean that Professor Lupin really is a werewolf? She figured it out before, too. Harry mouthed when Hermione wasn't looking. Reluctantly, Sirius calmed down a little. Yes. When he was a small child, his father did something to piss off Fenrir Greyback. Greyback, in case you didn't know, is infamous for his savagery and his predication for attacking children, often to get back at their parents. But isn't it dangerous to have a werewolf at school? Hermione gasped. He attended Hogwarts and except for one minor incident, which was mostly my fault, there were no problems, Sirius explained. What happened? Hermione asked, still looking anxious. Someone almost walked in on Professor Lupin when he was transformed. Had he done that, he would have either died or become a werewolf himself for sure, Sirius said, looking vaguely guilty. Probably just for Remus's sake, though, as he would never forgive himself and probably been executed if anything had happened to Snape. How do we know that can't happen again? Hermione demanded. Since then the Wolfsbane potion has been invented, Harry piped up. Professor Lupin still transforms physically, but he does it mentally, and so therefore it's perfectly safe. I suppose if Dumbledore thinks it's okay, then it must be safe, Hermione said slowly. Harry had never thought he'd be grateful for Hermione's blind faith and unwavering loyalty to Dumbledore, but although if that's the case, then why would Professor Snape assign us the essay? He must have known that someone could figure it out. Snape never liked Professor Lupin, Sirius explained. But he can't actually tell anyone, so he's just hinting at it. It's just so immature, it's unbelievable. Pot meet kettle, Harry muttered. The only really interesting that happened in the weeks to follow was the result of Luna and her father's investigations into the circumstances behind the Dementor's appearance. Harry really shouldn't have been surprised by the result, but he was anyway. Congratulations, Luna, Harry said. How in the world did you manage to track the attack back to Dolores Umbridge? A reporter's got to protect her sources, Harry, Luna said solemnly. I must say, I'm glad that we caught her, though. Endangering schoolchildren because she felt that your influence might be a threat. I know, Harry agreed. Really horrible thing to do. I wonder what her trial will be like. Fudge insists he didn't know anything about it, and I'm actually inclined to believe him. He really doesn't know much of what goes on around him. How did he get to be minister again? He's easily bribable and Dumbledore didn't want the job? Luna suggested. Ah, right. Still, Madam Bones would probably make a good minister. Harry mused. But then who would be in charge of the Aurors? Luna asked. The last thing we need is an incompetent and/or corrupt aura force. Maybe I can be minister someday, Harry said. I never really thought about it before that Boggart lesson, but it's an idea. I never like Mondays anyway, Luna said loyally. Chapter 33. Harry was not in a very good mood heading to divination, and it was all his so-called friends' fault. They were in a great mood, of course, seeing as how they had just come from charms where they had learned to cast the cheering charm. Even Hermione had remembered to go seeing as how Harry, as a concerned friend, and Percy, as a concerned head boy, had been making her get some sleep all year, and so she wasn't as frazzled. Harry, sadly, was not under the influence of the cheering charm. He had partnered with Hermione while Ron and Neville teamed up, and Hermione had somehow gotten it into her head that the thought of an extraordinarily cheerful and hyperactive Harry was a bad thing or something, and refused to cast it on him. When she explained the situation, Ron and Neville immediately agreed to let her practice the charm on the pair of them, and as a result both boys were practically glowing with happiness. So not fair. We're starting crystal balls early, Ron exclaimed. Yes. No more palm reading. And because we don't have to deal with all the different lines on the hand and just talk about what we see, it will be so much easier to make up, Neville added, pleased. Hermione, even cheerful, was hard-pressed to say something positive about their divination class. At least we're learning something new, she finally said lamely. How long do those stupid charms last? Harry muttered, annoyed. His classmates, of course, didn't answer as they were all too busy being high on life. And magic. Good day to you. Professor Trelawney greeted them, perking up at their obvious enthusiasm. I'm pleased to see you all so excited to start our study of the crystal ball. It's a little earlier than I had planned, but the fates have informed me that your examination in June will concern the orb, and I am anxious to give you sufficient practice. Well, honestly, the fates have informed her who sets the exam. She does. What an amazing prediction, Hermione scoffed. Her resiliency to the effects of the cheering charm, and Harry knew it wasn't because of his spellcasting as he'd long since mastered that particular charm, was quite admirable. I don't know, Hermione, Harry disagreed, just to be annoying. Self-fulfilling prophecies are the most dangerous kind, and we don't know that the orb would be on our exam if Professor Trelawney hadn't been notified. A self-fulfilling prophecy sounds really, really lame, Hermione replied. I'm with you, Harry said easily. But that doesn't mean that it's not true. Well said, Harry. Trelawney smiled over at him. I am often both fascinated and frustrated by the self-fulfilling natures of many prophecies. For instance, would they have come to pass had the prophecy not been made? And if the prophecy will be fulfilled regardless of the attempts of we mere mortals, then what purpose does receiving prophecies in the first place serve? But alas, that is a subject for another time. Hermione, who had actually looked mildly intrigued by that line of questioning, looked rather put out. So, what do you see? Neville asked when their teacher had finally deemed them ready to begin. I see. Harry trailed off, gazing into the crystal fog his mind supplied. My godfather turning Snape into at least 4 different people by the end of the year, he said instead. Neville snorted. Only 4? Harry shrugged. I said at least, didn't I? Anyway, what do you see? Neville glanced idly into the crystal ball, then smirked. I see Gryffindor winning the House Cup for the 3rd year in a row. I hate you, Harry deadpanned. You know that, right? Neville shrugged. I can live with it. You two are just making things up again, aren't you? Hermione accused. Ron and I can't see anything. Prove it, Neville said. I told you, Hermione. I saw a dash, Ron began by Hermione interrupted him. I highly doubt Harry and one of the twins are going to enter themselves into some sort of international competition at Hogwarts. Harry started coughing. Ron was alluding to the Triwizard Tournament? How in the dash? And why would Fred or George dash? Maybe these things weren't so ridiculous after all. No, on second thought they were just that stupid. Just because you can't see anything is no reason to shun the true believers, Hermione, Harry said seriously. Yeah, you can't be good at everything, Ron added. I don't want to be good at every dash, Hermione began, red-faced. Yes you do, Harry and Neville chorused. They have a point, my dear, Trelawney said gently, coming up from behind her. And as it stands, you are far too devoted to the world of logic and facts to ever really succeed in such a delicate art form as this. You know what? Hermione said angrily, shoving her book back into her bag. I don't even care anymore. This class is a waste of my time, and I can't believe it took me 7 months to realize this. I'm leaving. She then stormed out rather dramatically, but still slightly bouncy from the residual effects of the charm. Oh. Lavender squealed the moment she was gone. This is so cool. You told us that, around Easter, one of our numbers will leave us forever. And she totally did. Isn't that a little hasty? Seamus asked. Seeing Parvati and Lavender's sudden glares, he quickly backtracked. I mean, not that I don't have absolute faith in divination and everything, but she just stormed out of one class. I can't really imagine that Hermione Granger, of all people, would willingly drop a class, especially before exams. And especially considering the fact that she's using a time turner to get to all of her classes on time in the first place. I suppose you have a point, Parvati said grudgingly. But on the other hand, the prediction is right so far. What are the odds that it's just a coincidence? Besides, Dean added, Hermione basically told us all that she's not coming back. If she does end up returning, it would be really embarrassing for her, and considering that she never liked this class anyway and spends a lot of time with Harry, who we all know would never let her live it down, I think it's safe to say that she won't be coming back anytime soon. You're amazing, Professor, Lavender said, her voice full of awe. I'm impressed too, Harry admitted. I mean, it figures that if someone would drop the class, it would be her, but how did you know she'd be able to make it 7 months? You'd think if she managed to last this long, she could last another month and a half until exams, and then not sign up for it next year. When you have had as many years of experience with the inner eye as I have, you too will be able to remove logic from your interpretations of future events, Trelawney said dreamily. Harry grinned. Can't wait. Ron paled and started shaking. Can I drop the class too? Neville asked, sounding slightly desperate. No, Trelawney said without looking at him. That was quite a show, Harry said as he slid into his seat in Muggle Studies. I don't want to talk about it, Hermione said shortly. Harry smiled apologetically. I figured that. Still, dropping a class right before the exams? Are you sure that's the best decision? It will have made all the work you've already put into it completely pointless. The fact that I apparently don't have the inner eye or your skills at lying your ass off makes all the effort I've put into it all year completely pointless, Hermione countered. Besides, even with using the time turner to take breaks and get some rest, I'm still really stressing out and having to spend hours brushing up on something that really has no practical purpose and that I'm not convinced is genuine in the first place just seems rather a bit too much, really. You do realize that now half the class is convinced that Trelawney made a prediction, right? Harry said, grinning a bit. Hermione cocked her head, confused. No, why? Apparently our first class, she told us that one of our number would be leaving forever or something like that. I think she was talking about dying, as I'm fairly certain that was before she decided I wasn't doomed after all, but it was vague enough it could easily apply to that. Although how Lavender managed to remember that all these months, Harry shook his head, impressed. Maybe she wrote it down, Hermione suggested. Maybe, Harry conceded. Hi, Theodore. Why are you talking to me? Theodore not asked, sounding bored. Again? Because you're the one person I've found aside from Professor Snape who doesn't like me, Harry explained. Theodore snorted. That's what you think. Well, that's this obvious about it, Harry corrected. And as for the people I don't know, well, I don't really care what they think as long as enough of them like me well enough to do whatever I tell them to do. You realize you sound like some sort of cult leader, right? Theodore asked. I think you picked the wrong house if you were thinking of being a Dark Lord. Oh, no, I've currently got my heart set on Minister of Magic, Harry assured him. Now that is a scary thought. I'll definitely make a note to go abroad in the event that ever happens, Theodore said, actually shuddering a bit. Besides, I am not obvious about disliking you. You didn't even notice until we had this class together. Harry considered this. True, but now that I do know, I can't stop thinking about it. It's driving me crazy. At this, Theodore actually looked a little offended. You cannot possibly blame your vast array of mental problems on me. Well, you've certainly exacerbated them, Harry muttered. Theodore rolled his eyes. That I can live with. Do you often obsess over Slytherin boys? No. Harry lied, remembering those few months in second year, and all of sixth year with Draco back when he was Malfoy, and Snape, well, whenever anything went wrong, really. Hello, class, Professor Burbage said, entering the room. Today I thought we'd take a break from our normal topics and instead examine how Muggles view magic. Let's start with divination. Hermione groaned loudly. Don't worry, Harry, you'll be fine, Hermione said, her terrified look belying her confident words. I know I will, Harry said, spreading some margarine on his toast. You've got a firebolt, Ron added, trying his hardest to support his supposedly anxious friend. I've had a firebolt for the other 2 matches as well, Harry pointed out. If you lose, you know Draco will never, ever let this go, right? As an ever, Neville reminded him gravely. I know, but the fact of the matter is that I've got a better broom and, what's more, I'm simply better at this than he is. The only time I've ever lost is due to circumstances beyond my control, and if, for some ungodly reason, Dementors invade again, I'm catching the snitch, then saving everyone's souls, Harry vowed. Good to see you have your priorities in order, Ginny said sarcastically. And speaking of, if you die, can I have your broom? Are you guys even listening? Harry demanded. I doubt it, Percy replied from a few seats over. But then, today's the day of the big match, and everyone seems to have caught Quidditch fever. You don't, Harry pointed out, ignoring his spazzing friends in favor of someone that could usually be counted on to be sane. Well, unless his career was involved, but Percy hadn't even graduated yet. Oh, trust me, compared to first year I have a great deal of enthusiasm for Quidditch, Percy countered. But you barely support the team, Harry said, confused. Bill and Charlie used to play it all the time using my toys as quaffles, Percy explained. So did the twins, come to think of it. Naturally, I was quite anti-Quidditch when I started Hogwarts. So what happened? Harry wanted to know. You'd think that having siblings on the Quidditch team wouldn't help with that. Indeed it didn't, Percy agreed. Seeing as how first Charlie and then Fred and George felt the need to steal my books anytime they wanted to play a pickup game. Still, one does not surviving rooming with Oliver Wood for 7 years without picking up a basic appreciation of the game. So it was self-preservation then? Harry grinned. Like you wouldn't believe. Hey, Flint, Harry called out. What, Potters? Flint snapped back. They were in the middle of the game, after all, and even if Harry, as Seeker, could dally around all he wanted to as long as Draco didn't spot the snitch either, that didn't mean that a chaser like him could. I didn't go to the other Slytherin matches, so I wouldn't know as you were there or not. But why are you here? Harry inquired. I know you graduated. Despite his annoyance, Flint actually smirked. True, but Dumbledore never comes to the matches and the other teachers all just assume I'm repeating someone else's class. I'm actually not sure I should be insulted or relieved. It's that easy to convince everyone that I somehow managed to fail. What about the other Slytherins? Harry wanted to know. What about them? Asked Flint. Wouldn't they realize that you're only ever seen at matches and possibly practices? Harry said reasonably. Flint snorted. Of course they do, but they have a lot of house pride and not much respect for school rules. Besides, there weren't any other prospects for captain. I see, Harry said thoughtfully. Great, now bugger off, Flint ordered as he zoomed after Katie Bell. Fine, be that way. Now let's see. Hey, is that the snitch? Harry wondered aloud as he hurtled towards it. 15 feet away from it, his broom lurched. Surprised, Harry turned around to see Draco grabbing onto his firebolt and pulling it back. What the hell? Draco looked positively gleeful. All's fair in love, and now. One of his hands released the broom. Harry nodded and cast another stinging hex at the other boy to make him let go. Indeed. With that, he hurtled after the snitch again. Yes. 3 for 3. I've still got it. Chapter 34. Exams were never fun. Even if you were 12 years older than everyone else taking the exams and had, in fact, literally done some of the spells in your sleep. and the complaining from everyone else about how difficult it was to turn a teapot into a tortoise. Although that wasn't nearly as bad as Hermione moaning about how her tortoise looked more like a turtle. "Hermione," Harry said patiently, "we've been over this. You did the spell for changing a teacup into a tortoise, not the spell for changing a teacup into a turtle. And don't think Professor McGonagall won't get a letter from the new magical chapter of PETA for this. Seriously, what is with everyone and their constant abuse of animals? Harry, look at how everyone treats people who don't happen to have magical powers and ask me that again," Hermione told him. "Anyway, getting back to the fact that I'm going to fail Dash." "Oh, please, Hermione," Ron scoffed. "No one fails. Ever." "Marcus Flint did," Hermione reminded them. Harry snorted. "What?" she demanded. "Nothing, just that he didn't fail. He just showed up to play Quidditch," Harry explained. Hermione rolled her eyes at that. "Right. Like anyone would come all the way back to Hogwarts and convince everyone that they had to repeat a year just to play a couple of Quidditch games." There was silence for a moment as the three boys exchanged pitying glances. "I totally would," Ron said. "Me too," Neville agreed. "They would have to pay me," decided Harry. "Right, because that's not pathetic at all," Hermione rolled her eyes. "It's not pathetic," Ron corrected her. "It's Quidditch. And even if it were possible for anyone to fail at Hogwarts," Neville quickly changed the subject as Hermione looked to be bracing herself on a rant about Quidditch fanatics. "Having the end result look like a practically identical species isn't exactly the worst thing that could happen. I mean, look at Ron's tortoise. It's still peed tea. Hey, at least I didn't lose my head and accidentally turn my teacup into a flock of flamingos," Ron shot back. "Oh, right, Hannah Abbott," Harry smiled fondly. "One of these days that girl is going to learn to keep her head in an exam." "Mine still wasn't as good as Harry's, though," Hermione pouted. "Professor McGonagall said she'd never seen a more perfect tortoise in all her years at Hogwarts. I just can't compete with that." "Don't feel bad, Hermione," Harry reassured her. "McGonagall just thinks I'm a transfiguration prodigy, like my dad apparently was. But all the other teachers say the same thing," Hermione pointed out. "Well, except for Snape. Snape had, as a matter of fact, docked Harry's potion 5 points because he had ended up using a modified recipe for the confusing concoction that Luna always swore by. Apparently her mum had made the changes." "Don't you mean Slughorn?" Harry grinned. Right before their potions exam, Sirius had apparently decided that since Snape's hovering tendencies were such a distraction, replacing Snape's unpleasant countenance with Slughorn's physically incapable of being imposing one would make them all feel better. Of course, half the class didn't even know who Slughorn was, but it was the thought that counted. Besides, Harry knew full well and was amused as hell. And it was a good thing that he was so amused, because otherwise he'd be annoyed that Hermione had, once again, refused to use the cheering charm on him for the exam. And to make matter worse, Professor Flitwick seemed to agree with her and let her do the charm on somebody else. Hagrid's exam was a great deal more interesting than Don't Kill the Flobberworms, which Harry vaguely remembered it to be last time. This time, they all had to take a ride on a hippogriff. Needless to say, this was Harry's easiest exam to date. The rest of the class vehemently disagreed with that, but the fact that no one else knew what to do was their own damn fault for making him deal with Buckbeak alone during their first class. Their astronomy exam went okay, or so Harry was told. He kind of fell asleep 10 minutes into it, but his friends assured him that when Professor Sinistra came by to give him his oral exam, he had sleep answered all of her questions correctly. So maybe that was the easiest exam ever. In herbology, Harry took great delight in making fun of his classmates for not knowing any charms to cast to keep from getting sunburned as they all turned bright red as the hours wore on. The exam itself was pretty boring, but then that was herbology. Even if it was dealing with magical and potentially lethal plants, the fact remained that it was a class on plants. He just couldn't find it within himself to really care one way or another. Muggle Studies was his first new exam of the timeline, and it was actually rather enjoyable. They basically just took a portkey to London, were handed a few pounds, and told to try and act inconspicuous. Granted, they had to do a paper on the experience once it was over, but still, He and Hermione had had fun pretending to be tourists. Divination was also easy, since it just took Harry making something up which he had been doing on a regular basis ever since he came back to the past. Harry told Trelawney that he saw a group of people trying to bring Voldemort back to life and getting arrested. She jumped a little at the name, but Harry ignored it. He didn't know that was going to happen, per se, but so help him it had better. And if nothing else, Harry's vehemence seemed to impress the professor. Their history of magic exam was probably the biggest deviation from what had happened during the previous timeline's exams. Instead of a written test about medieval witch hunts that nobody cared about and only ever ended up killing muggles anyway, Sirius announced that everyone was going to have to write an essay about something they'd learned in his class that year, ranging from 200 words to 1,600 words, depending on how well they did in his oral quiz. Basically, he called on them at random and asked them a question about what they'd covered that year. The first one to miss a question was out and had to write the 1,600-word essay. The second one to miss a question had to write the 1,400-word essay, and so on. Harry was kind of miffed because he'd lost to Hermione at the last second with, "What is the name of the orphanage Tom Riddle grew up in?" Like he cared. Still, a 400-word essay was a piece of cake. He was tempted to go over to annoy his classmates who had to write more, but had foregone that for turning it in within 10 minutes and playing hangman with Sirius while everyone else wrote and Hermione revised. Needless to say, when her 200-word essay turned out to be a little over 3,000, no one was exactly surprised. Annoyed, granted, but not surprised. And as the students were used to having their essays be a certain number of inches or, recently, pages, Sirius cast a spell on all of their paper to automatically list how many words they had so far. Harry's favorite exam, of course, was Defense Against the Dark Arts. The obstacle course was great fun and reminded him a little bit of Auror training, on that first day where they were weeding out those who couldn't hack it at the real training. Harry, of course, finished first with full marks. This annoyed Hermione to no end, considering he'd done it backwards, with his eyes closed and without his wand. But that was just what she got for beating him in Sirius's class. There was no way his godfather would let him live down being outsmarted by a 14-year-old, even if it was Hermione. "I can't believe you took directions from our exam." Harry laughed at Ron, who had encountered problems upon reaching the Hinkapunk when he had, for some reason, followed its advice and ended up sinking waist-high into the quagmire. "What would you know? You had your eyes closed the entire time." "It's not like you could have stopped it and asked for directions," Ron replied. "I get that you're sore that I beat you so blatantly in this exam," Harry told his agitated friend. "But you have to remember, this is my subject. You had the fastest time yet," Ron pointed out, still irritated. "My subject," Harry reiterated. "Your modesty is really your best quality, Harry," Hermione said dryly as she came up behind them. "Hey," Harry greeted her. "How was Sonnet spewing McGonagall?" "She wasn't," Hermione answered. Upon seeing the twin looks of confusion on Harry and Ron's faces, she elaborated, "This time she rapping an opera about my failings." Harry laughed. "Now that I have to see. I wonder if I can dash." "No," Ron interrupted. "I can see what you're going to ask, and I'm telling you right now, she'll never do it, mate." "Spoil sport," Harry pouted. "Hey, what's taking Neville? He's been in there with the boggart for over 20 minutes now." Hermione and Ron exchanged meaningful glances. "Well," Hermione began, trying to be tactful, "his boggart is rather intimidating." "It is not dash," Harry started to say when he was interrupted by Neville bursting out of the trunk with the boggart, screaming. "Oh, shut up," Harry said, annoyed as Ron started giggling. "What happened?" Ron asked between his laughter. Neville looked tentatively at Harry. "You wouldn't really convert your old house into a haunted house, would you? Or allow people to keep their name off of the list of registered animagus by paying extra? Or give the house elves a union? Or allow goblins to use wands on Mondays, since they don't exist? Or make everyone wear pink on Thursdays? Or make Do the Hippogriff by the Weird Sisters Magical Britain's national anthem? Or regularly import llamas and releasing them in random places? Or dash? Dear God, how many of those do you have?" Hermione asked, horror-struck. Neville shrugged. "Remember, I was in there for a while." Harry sighed. "To answer your question, Neville, no, I would not. But I do plan on becoming minister one day. Thanks for the idea. With that, Neville promptly fainted. Harry rolled his eyes. He is so faking. He nudged the boy with his foot. Probably. This year, Harry didn't even bother sitting down at the Gryffindor table during the end-of-the-year feast. He knew he'd have to bail very shortly anyway when Dumbledore started reading off point totals, so he just made his way to the Slytherins at the beginning of the meal. "Why are you here?" a black boy Harry thought might be in a few of his classes asked. "I can't possibly be with the Gryffindors when we win the House Cup," Harry explained. "And I've sat with the Ravenclaws a few times already recently." "Why can't you sit with the Hufflepuffs?" the boy asked, eyeing him warily. "Blaise, don't," Theodore warned, sitting down next to the boy in question. Blaise Zabini, apparently. "Don't what?" Blaise asked, confused. "I just asked him a question." "Talking encourages him," Theodore explained. "I don't need to be encouraged," Harry claimed. "I'm a Gryffindor." "We noticed," Draco said, sliding into the seat beside Harry. "And as for why I'm not at the Hufflepuff table, well, the first time Draco and I met we were talking about the houses. We decided that if we ended up in Hufflepuff, he'd leave and I'd defect. Since I'd have to come over here anyway if I went over to the Hufflepuff table, I decided to just spare myself a trip and come here instead," Harry explained. "How can you defect from something if you haven't actually been a part of it in the first place?" Blaise couldn't help asking. "Blaise!" Theodore cried. "Sorry," he apologized. But Draco's encouraging him, too. "Why aren't you yelling at him?" Theodore rolled his eyes. "Draco, God help him, likes Potter. Not to mention my teenage rebellion," Draco added. "That reminds me, are your parents still pissed?" Harry asked. Draco snorted, but didn't say anything. Harry took that as a yes. Dumbledore stood up then. "This year has been an exceptionally high-scoring year, as far as house points go, the highest I've ever seen. In fourth place is Hufflepuff with 9,307 points. In third place we have Ravenclaw with 9,526 points. In second place we have Slytherin with 10,094 points. And in first place, with the single greatest number of points accumulated. During the course of 1 year we have Gryffindor with 13,877 points. What's with these freakishly high point tallies?" Draco asked. "Sirius gives out points like candy," Harry explained. "Not to mention his 50 points to anyone who he hears say Voldemort thing. For once, I do not actually have any last-minute points to give out. Dumbledore paused as Sirius leaned over and said something. "Correction, I award Harry Potter 50 points for finally saying Voldemort, bringing Gryffindor's total up to 13927. Harry banged his head on the table. "Damn him, Dumbledore?" Draco asked. "No, Sirius. I was so careful not to say that in front of him this year, but now, and damn Neville, too, for predicting that we'd win again." "Everyone knew you were going to win," Theodore pointed out. "Not helping," Harry said. "Not trying to," Theodore replied. "Seriously, does everyone get to talk to Potter but me?" Blaise complained. "So, how did you beat the curse?" Harry asked Remus curiously. "Curse?" Remus repeated absently as he packed. "You know, the one Voldemort put on the defense against the dark arts position, so Dumbledore would have to get a new one every year? Seriously immature of him. By the way," Harry reflected. "Oh, I didn't. My contract was only for a year," Remus told him. "Oh." Harry paused. "What are you going to do now, then? I mean, didn't you say your lycanthropy made it kind of hard to find work?" Remus smiled at that. "Normally, yes, but Sirius totally hired him to be Lord Black," Sirius interrupted, barging into Remus' office. "He hired you to be Lord Black?" Harry looked to Remus for confirmation. Remus nodded. "He likes the title, but he doesn't want to deal with all the responsibilities, and I needed a job. Besides," Sirius added, "Mooney's, like, the most responsible person I know. He knows all the laws. He's a half-blood, so it ought to annoy anyone I'm related to who isn't Remus's future girlfriend or her mother, and for the last time, Sirius," Remus cut in. "Nymphadora is not my girlfriend. She lets you call her Nymphadora," Harry pointed out. "Yeah, not even I get to do that," Sirius agreed. She let Cedric Diggory and Charlie Weasley call her that, too, Remus said defensively. Harry nodded. Yeah, but those two are because she lost a bet. And she doesn't bet first-name privileges anymore. I should know. I've tried. Nymphadora is a bit young for me, Remus insisted. Seeing as how she just graduated 2 years ago. I absolutely agree, Sirius said heartily, patting Remus on the back. Remus looked up surprised. You do? Definitely, Sirius confirmed. For another 2 or 3 years. But then I expect you and her to start going out. I'm sure you'll be very happy together. But Harry and I expect joint godfather status. Aren't you going to warn me about breaking her heart? Remus asked, a bit dazed. And what's this about children, Dash? Why, are you planning on breaking her heart? Sirius challenged, pointedly ignoring the second question. Well, no, but Dash, Remus began. Then she can handle herself. She is well on her way to becoming an Auror, after all, Sirius said proudly. And I'm sure she could castrate you far better than I ever could. Remus gulped. Chapter 35. After another epic but nondescript summer, Harry and Sirius decided to end things by dragging Remus and Tonks along to the Quidditch World Cup. Remus because he was Sirius' best friend and Tonks because she was Sirius' sole cool relative. And also because they wanted Remus and Tonks nice and acquainted for when Tonks was actually old enough for Remus to date. The first people they met, naturally, were Cedric Diggory and his father, whose name Harry never could remember, who only seemed to want to talk about that one time Cedric beat Harry. It was kind of creepy, really. Ced told us all about you, of course, Mr. Diggory was saying. Said you're mad as a hatter, but practically a demon on a broom. I said to him, Ced, that'll be something to tell your grandchildren, that will you beat Harry Potter's. How does it feel to have your father deciding that winning an amateur Quidditch match is going to be your greatest achievement in life? Harry asked curiously. Cedric made a face. Fantastic. I'd imagine it's almost as nice as having everyone decide that your greatest achievement will be making it to your second birthday, something everyone else has managed just fine without getting famous. Harry laughed. Touché. And it's not like it was even a fair match, anyway, since the Dementors came out of nowhere and attacked, Cedric continued. Harry, much as his pride was begging him not to, which was ironic to be sure, disagreed. You caught the snitch before you even realized the Dementors were there. While that might be slightly oblivious of you, it still meant that you had the snitch in your sights, and I was nowhere near you. Even if the Dementors hadn't shown up, you still would have caught it. Cedric smirked. Does that mean you're admitting I'm better than you? Like hell, Harry scoffed. I've beaten you 2 games to 1. But I am the only one who's ever beaten you at Quidditch, Cedric pointed out. Which I'm sure your grandchildren will just love hearing about, Harry countered. If your popularity doesn't die down, they probably will, Cedric said, shaking his head. Besides, I've only ever played against you, Draco, and Cho. Saying I'm a better seeker than 3 other people isn't really saying much, Harry told the older boy. Hey, that reminds me.
Did you make head boy?
Cedric gave him a strange look. Harry, I'm a 6th year. Harry blinked, surprised. You are? Crap, that makes it even worse. That makes what even worse? Cedric asked, confused. Word of advice, if you ever find yourself suddenly and mysteriously portkeyed to a graveyard, don't ask questions, don't look around, just grab the portkey again and get out of there, Harry said firmly. All right, Cedric agreed finally. That sounds oddly specific, do Dash. What can I say? Harry interrupted. I'm a divination prodigy. I don't believe in divination, Cedric replied immediately. I don't really care, Harry confessed. But you did agree to do that, so my work here is done. With that, Harry turned his attention back to the adults. That's fascinating, Amos, Remus was saying. Oh, right. Amos was his name. Well, Harry would probably end up forgetting it again as soon as he left, anyway. We have to keep moving, though. We're looking for the Weasleys. They promised to save us a spot for our tent. I quite understand, Amos said heartily. Don't let us keep you. I need to discuss that bill on werewolf rights you're working on with you when we get back to the ministry, though. I've got a few ideas on the subject myself. I'll stop by and see you first thing Monday, Remus promised. So, you're working on a bill about werewolf rights? Harry asked as they set off again. Won't that cause problems because people will assume you're just doing it because you're a werewolf? Well, I am mostly doing it because I'm a werewolf, Remus admitted. If I weren't, I wouldn't be as aware of the blatant discrimination and appalling treatment we receive. Not to mention the fact that most people don't know about his, what did you call it, Sirius? His furry little problem, Tonks added. Oh, that was code for Remus is a werewolf. Harry deadpanned. I thought it meant that he had a badly behaved rabbit. How did you corrupt him so quickly? Remus demanded, turning to Sirius. You've only known him for about a year. It's not me, Sirius insisted, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. It's the genes. And partly me, I guess, but mostly just James. Remus just rolled his eyes. All in all, they were very grateful to finally reach the Weasleys. When they were walking through a rather pro-Irish section, Seamus had ambushed them and dragged them off to meet his mother, and Tonks almost started a riot by confessing that she didn't actually know who was playing besides, whatever team that Crumb guy's on. Harry and Sirius, both avid Quidditch fans themselves, were currently refusing to speak to her. Hey, what took you so long? Ron asked. Tonks almost started a riot, Remus explained when Sirius and Harry pointedly didn't say anything. Realizing that the Weasleys were also somewhat of a family of Quidditch fanatics, he continued, Don't ask. Did that take all day or something?
Ginny asked.
We've been here for 4 hours. Harry's eyes widened in horror at the thought of waking up that early during the summer. Why? Because we're not old enough to apparate like Bill, Charlie, and Percy, Ginny explained sourly. Does that mean that you haven't been here that long? God no, Harry shook his head vehemently. Remus and Tonks operate, while I did side-along apparition with Sirius.
Dad.
Why couldn't we do side-along apparition and get here at a normal time? Ginny demanded. Because we had 4 people who could operate and 6 who couldn't, including Hermione and Neville, Arthur explained. I didn't want to make 2 trips. Grumbling under her breath. Ginny, let it go. Hey, Hermione, Harry greeted his Quidditch enthusiasm-challenged friend. Do you know who's playing? Of course, she replied, looking bemused. Ireland and Bulgaria. How could I not know that? No idea, Harry said honestly. Either way, this is Sirius's cool relative, Tonks. I think you two would get along. Even I know that Ireland and Bulgaria are playing each other, Percy said. Are you saying that someone here didn't? Possibly Tonks. Harry nodded sadly. I just don't get it. I mean, I know since Hermione just said who is playing, I have no proof you knew before then, but I'm willing to give Oliver the benefit of the doubt on that one. Don't you mean give me the benefit of the doubt?
Percy asked.
Harry shook his head. No, I'm pretty sure I meant Oliver, seeing as how it's all thanks to him that you have even a basic appreciation of the sport. And it's all thanks to my brothers that I needed Oliver's intervention, Percy continued. Speaking of, did the twins just bet their entire saving that Ireland will win the match, but Crumb will get the snitch? Harry looked over at the twins, who were handing a sizable bag of money over to Ludo Bagman. Oh no, he breathed, remembering Bagman's chronic gambling and goblin problems that had led to him practically stalking Harry during the tournament. You sound pretty confident, Harry noted, making his way over to his future business partners. You know what? I'll bet you 50 galleons that Ireland gets the snitch. The twins exchanged glances. We don't actually have dash, Fred began. 50 galleons dash, George continued. So we can't dash. In good conscience dash. Take that bet, Fred finished. You won't need 50 galleons if you win, Harry pointed out. And if not, it's not like I don't see you every day anyway. So again. How sure are you? The twins had a silent conversation with their eyes. We'll take it, George said finally. Here you go. Harry pulled out a large pouch of money, counted out 50 galleons, and put it in a smaller bag before handing it to the twins. Take good care of my money. There, that should take care of most of the twins' problems when Bagman proved not to be good for it. Of course, that wasn't likely to stop them from hounding Bagman anyone, but at least this way it might stop Molly from murdering her troublemaking sons and the father who let it happen. Betting with school children, Ludo? Barty Crouch asked disdainfully as he entered the clearing. Bagman really didn't have a response for that, seeing as how it was true. Never mind, Crouch said impatiently. I've been looking for you everywhere. The Bulgarians are insisting that we add another 12 seats to the top box. Oh, is that what they're after? Bagman asked. I thought the chap was asking to borrow a pair of tweezers. Bit of a strong accent. Next time you cannot understand an accent, kindly find someone to interpret for you, Crouch said sternly. Mr. Crouch. Percy greeted a little breathlessly, bowing slightly. Would you like a cup of tea? No thank you, Weasley. Crouch shook his head. I brought my own drink.
With that, he took a sip of his flask.
Harry started. Did Crouch just get Percy's name right? Although, come to think of it, it was a little strange how he kept getting it wrong before, since he clearly knew who Arthur was, and you couldn't really miss that the two were related. Why, Barty, Bagman said with a grin. Is that whiskey you've got in there? Certainly not. Crouch looked highly affronted. I would never stoop so low as to drink on the job or at such an important international event like this. I'm just very particular about my tea, so I brought my own so as not to make a fuss. If you say so. Bagman sing-songed. Any news on Bertha Jorkins yet? Arthur asked the other two department heads. Not a dicky bird, said Bagman comfortably. But she'll turn up. Poor old Bertha, memory like a leaky cauldron, and no sense of direction. Lost, you take my word for it. She'll wander back into the office sometime in October, thinking it's still July. You don't think it might be time to send someone to look for her? Arthur suggested tentatively. The problem is, Arthur, that she went missing in Albania, Crouch explained. We have asked the authorities to be on the lookout for her, but that's about all we can do, as it's out of our jurisdiction. Besides, no one really remembers seeing her, so there aren't even any solid leads. We're hoping, of course, but you know how these things are. She was probably attacked by a local dark wizard or some sort of dark creature. Harry felt the blood drain from his face. He remembered Bertha. She had come out of Voldemort's wand right before his parents. He didn't remember too much about her disappearance, except that Voldemort had killed her after Pettigrew had brought her to him, and that's how he knew of the tournament. But if Pettigrew were in Azkaban, then what happened to Bertha? Was it just a coincidence? Harry hated coincidences. Where are you sitting? Arthur asked Sirius as everyone made their way into the giant stadium. Top box, Sirius said proudly. It was part of my reparation. Of course, the rest of it went to buying Harry a firebolt, but you don't mind because I'm your godson and you love me? Harry suggested. Let's go with that, sure, Sirius replied. That's where we're sitting, too, Arthur enthused. Bagman owed me a favor. The ministry is bending over backwards so I don't write that tell-all exposé about life as an innocent man in Azkaban, Sirius countered. Harry, Fudge said warmly, standing up to greet him. So, nice to see you again. And under better circumstances that last time, I'd like to think. Allow me to introduce you to the Bulgarian Minister of Magic. He doesn't speak a word of English, but dash. Really? Sirius perked up. I speak Bulgarian. Tonks looked at him in surprise. You do? Of course, Sirius nodded. So, does your mother, come to think of it? After Dumbledore got appointed headmaster, our parents were debating whether to send us to Durmstrang. Of course, Durmstrang isn't actually in Bulgaria, but it has plenty of Bulgarian students, and they made us learn all the languages they thought we might encounter. Really? Tonks was fascinated. What changed their minds? They decided the uniforms were tacky, Narcissa Malfoy replied, entering the box, followed by her husband and son. Hello, Sirius. Narcissa. Sirius nodded his head. Draco.
He paused.
I don't actually remember what your husband's name is. Lucius, Narcissa replied. I heard you gave away your title. I'm actually more of a regent than anything else. Remus clarified. I'm too busy to be bothered, Sirius added. Teaching at Hogwarts, having a life, very few people manage both, you know. So, do you think you could help translate? Fudge piped up. Sirius looked startled, like he'd completely forgotten about Fudge and his foreign language woes. Oh, certainly yes. He moved over closer to the foreign minister and began conversing with him in his native tongue. Hi, Draco, Harry greeted. Narcissa shot him an icy look even as Draco waved back cheerfully. You want to sit by us? Harry offered. Draco considered it. As long as Neville sits on your other side so I won't get into a fight with the weasel, or my father won't freak out because I look like I'm associating with Granger, it should be all right. Does your father even know who Hermione is? Neville asked curiously. Being a pureblood himself and rather laid back as a rule, Neville had really never had any problems with Draco after first year, when Draco realized that Neville wasn't the easy target he had initially pegged him for. No, but my mother might, Draco confided. Do we have to deal with him everywhere? Ron complained. I could go sit over by him if it bothers you, Harry volunteered. Ginny looked over at Draco's parents, who looked very much like they wanted to inflict bodily harm on Harry. You know, I think Malfoy will be fine here. Mother or father, I'm going to go sit by the boy who saved us all from you-know-who, Draco announced, knowing that as much as his parents might dislike Harry, they couldn't really refuse to let Draco sit by him after he phrased it like that. Arthur and Lucius spent the rest of the time before the match trading insults, while Narcissa reluctantly made small talk with Remus and Tonks. At one point, Sirius came over to explain that the Bulgarian minister knew English just fine, but he never liked fudge, so he was pretending not to speak it to annoy him. The two men were apparently having a grand old time insulting fudge, without anyone but Narcissa being the wiser. Harry knew the Irish mascots were leprechauns, of course, but had forgotten what the Bulgarian one was, and so was quite surprised when the field was stormed by Vila. Draco, Neville, and Ron, Harry noted with some amusement, all stood up and attempted to jump off the balcony and had to be held back by the non-male and/or teenage members of the group. God, it's like you've never seen a Vila before, Harry said, shaking his head incredulously. Ron flushed. Why weren't you affected? Because I'm not as hormonal, Harry suggested.
What?
Ron asked. Never mind. Leprechauns, Arthur exclaimed when it was the Irish's turn to display their mascots. There you go, Ron yelled happily, stuffing a fistful of gold coins into Harry's hand. For the omnioculars. Now you've got to buy me a Christmas present, huh? Harry had wanted to make the omnioculars he'd bought Ron and Ginny a substitute Christmas present, but Ron had insisted. That leprechaun gold disappears after a couple of hours, right? Harry pointed out.
What?
Ron looked upset. Yes, they just make it to amuse themselves, Hermione explained. It causes all kinds of controversy when people pay in leprechaun gold, and it disappears as no one can really tell if the person who paid in it knew it was leprechaun gold, or if they themselves were also tricked. It's a good thing that it doesn't last either, or else think of what inflation would be like. Besides, Neville added, since the gold was everywhere, you can't really pay him back using something that anyone could pick up off the ground. Looks like you're back to no Christmas present, Ginny added, annoyed that Ron had included here in the no present deal as she had no problem accepting the 10 galleon gift. Then again, she had a small fortune herself sitting in her own private Gringotts vault that her family didn't know about from the basilisk, so maybe that was why. Don't worry, Ron. Harry hurried to reassure his friend, who was looking more distraught by the second. Christmas is still 4 months away. I'll probably forget by then, and get you something anyway. That's not the point. Ron burst out. You're always paying for everything. It's because I'm an orphan, Harry explained. And because I'm not afraid to exploit my fame for all it's worth. Ron still looked a bit disgruntled, but he quieted down after that. The match was interesting enough, if a bit predictable. After all, nothing he had done differently in the past 3 years did anything to make the Irish team, or Crumb, any worse, and so once again the twins won their bet, though this time they didn't lose their savings and actually made nearly 13 galleons on it. Harry was just happy that he was still able to follow the play without the aid of omnioculars, which he had been worrying about as it had also been 3 years since his last high-speed Quidditch match. Of course, the after-game celebration was cut a bit short as screams and shouts suddenly broke out at the campsite. Harry, Arthur burst into Harry's tent. We've got to go. Kids, you get into the woods, okay? We adults have to take care of this. Geez, Ron grumbled as the adults ran off. They're making it sound like there's a Death Eater attack or something. Neville, who was watching two masked wizards levitating a small muggle child and spinning him like a top with a look of distaste on his face, said, "I know no one here actually believes in divination, except, perhaps, Harry, but that's 2 for 2, Ron." "This is really sick," Ron muttered, shaking his head at the sight, before they all hurried off into the woods. Suddenly, Ron crashed to the ground.
Ah!
Tripped over a tree root. "Well, with feet that size, it would be hard not to," Draco drawled from behind them. "Hadn't you better be hurrying along now before they spot you? Are you saying that they're going to be able to tell that Hermione's Muggle-born and so she's in danger?" Harry asked skeptically. Draco raised an eyebrow. "Don't be silly. It's dark, they're drunk, they probably don't know who she is anyway, and nothing about her really screams out Muggle-born until she starts talking. I was more referring to the fact that they'll probably not be opposed to attacking you, given they blame you for the Dark Lord's downfall." "Oh," Harry said, momentarily taken aback. "That's thoughtful. You really shouldn't call him the Dark Lord, though. It makes you sound like a Death Eater." "You really shouldn't call him by his name," Draco countered. "It makes you sound like an idiot." "Speaking of Death Eaters," Ron said, glaring at his most hated rival. "Where are your parents?" "Out there wearing masks." Draco just eyed him lazily. "How rude. Potter, how can you be friends with such a heathen?" "We bonded over candy, remember?" Harry said absently, scanning the skies. "Shouldn't the Dark Mark be showing up soon?" By the time the adults came to get them several hours later after everything was safe again, the Dark Mark still hadn't made an appearance. That made Harry uneasy, for reasons he couldn't quite explain. Something told him that something unexpected was happening again, but unlike with Pettigrew, he didn't know what. Chapter 36. Harry, who had spent the night before his return to Hogwarts at the Burrow so he could go with the Weasleys, Hermione, and Neville, woke up to the familiar sounds of Ron and Hermione bickering. Seriously, why had it taken him so long to realize that those two had unresolved sexual tension up to their ears? Right, the same reason it had taken him 6 years to realize Ginny liked him. He was oblivious as hell back then. "If you ask me, Mr. Crouch is very lucky no one at the Daily Prophet knows how mean he is to elves," Hermione was saying angrily. "What are you talking about?" Ron replied, sounding exasperated. "He was very nice to her. He let her stay in his tent during the match because she was scared of heights and everything. He doesn't pay Winky," Hermione snapped. "Therefore she's his slave." "No one pays house elves, Hermione," Ron retorted. "That's the point of having a house elf." "Harry does," Hermione pointed to him as he came into the room. "Leave me out of this," Harry requested but went unheeded. "Yeah. Well, Harry's not exactly a shining example of normality, is he?" Ron pointed out. "Besides, from what I can tell, Dobby's pretty off, too. As much as I hate to get involved in your little lover's spat, and believe me, I do hate to get involved, Ron has a point," Neville said, presumably drawn to the kitchen by the sound of shouting. "Most house elves get offended if you try to pay them. They don't want to be free. So, you're saying it's alright to enslave an entire race of magical creatures?" Hermione demanded angrily, turning on him. "I'm not saying anything of the sort," Neville held up his hands in a placating gesture. "But that's house elf mentality. If you gave them all clothes today and forced them to take payment for their work, less people would want them and they would be very unhappy. You want change, you need to change people's mentality first." "Humph. Besides, since house elves are always enslaved and Mr. Crouch didn't seem to be very abusive when you guys met Winky, I don't anyone, least of all the Daily Prophet, really cares," Harry pointed out. "Harry, Mum wanted me to give this to you." Ginny came up behind him and dumped a parcel into Harry's hand. "Oh, thanks, I guess," Harry said, a little confused. "What is it?" "Mum figured that since you were running around with Sirius all summer you wouldn't have had time to do your school shopping, so she got some gold out of your vault and did it for you," Ginny explained. "Why does your mother have access to my Gringotts vault?" Harry asked immediately. Ginny shrugged. "Who knows? Seriously, I need to see a list of who's authorized because really, the only one who should be able to access it is me and because of my minor status, my godfather," Harry decided. Ginny sighed loudly. "Why do you always make everything so difficult?" Can't you just be thankful that she got your school supplies for you? I would, Harry admitted. Except that I already paid Dobby to do it for me. Oh, Ginny said. Well, that's kind of awkward. Oh, don't worry, Harry waved it off. I can just sell them throughout the year to anyone who needs to replace any of their supplies. It will be much faster than I'll post. And that's really an idea. Well, at least you're making the best of everything, Ginny said doubtfully. This means I've got 2 sets of dress robes. Harry mused. I'm only ever actually going to wear one though. Hey, Ron, he called. Yeah? Ron, who had returned to bickering with Hermione, looked over at him. Due to a shopping error, I now have 2 sets of dress robes. I only need 1 set. Do you want to borrow my 2nd set? Harry offered. Ron made a face. Harry, you know how I feel about Shari Dash. Laundry, Mrs. Weasley announced, walking into the room and handing robes to the occupants. Mum, you gave me Ginny's new dress, Ron said, holding a long, maroon velvet dress robe with a moldy-looking lace frill at the collar and matching lace cuffs out to her. Harry wondered vaguely why Molly always tried to make Ron wear maroon. It wasn't like she didn't have the exact same hair color. Surely she realized he looked horrible in it by now? Was the maroon really the only color available on sale? Couldn't she use a spell to change the color? Ginny snorted. Please. I wouldn't be caught dead in that. Then what dash? Ron began, eyeing the dress robes nervously. Ginny, Molly scolded. Those are your new dress robes, of course. Right. Ron nodded. Harry, is your offer still open? The offer I made 2 minutes ago? Harry asked rhetorically. Of course. Great. Ron looked relieved.
What offer is this?
Molly asked curiously. Harry's lending me his spare set of dress robes for whatever we need dress robes for, Ron explained. Molly's mouth became a thin line.
He most certainly is not.
You're going to wear these dress robes, and you're going to like it, young man. Mrs. Weasley, Harry cut in hesitantly, hoping the Weasley matron wasn't about to bite his head off. Yes, Harry dear, she asked warmly. I really don't need 2 sets, but I currently have them. If I don't let Ron use them, then chances are I'll just end up giving them to Dobby, and they're too big for him to have any real use for. So he'll probably cut it up and use it as a cleaning cloth, and this material is far too nice for that, Harry said earnestly. Well, Molly looked like she was relenting. Besides, you should see Ginny's robes. Ron pointed to his sister's very pretty royal blue dress robes. Ginevra, Molly gasped. Where did you dash? Ginny shot a glare at her brother. There was a sale going on, she lied, still refusing to admit she had money for fear her parents would try and make her wait until she was of age to access it, so she'd be responsible with it. Well, she didn't want to be responsible. She wanted to get out of wearing maroon to whatever they needed dress robes for. We'll talk about this later, young lady, Molly promised as she swept out of the room. Ginny snorted. When? I'm going back to Hogwarts tomorrow. She is really scary, Hermione said quietly. Oh, are you two still in the room? Harry asked, looking over at her and Neville. Why haven't you said anything for the past 10 minutes? We know better than to invoke the famous Weasley temper, Neville explained. You know, she really reminds me of my gran sometimes, except more maternal. Famous Weasley temper? Harry repeated incredulously. As his 4 friends nodded, he started laughing. Guys, Mr. Weasley is one of the most even-tempered people I've ever met. The one with the temper is Mrs. Weasley, and she's a Pruitt. So wouldn't it be the famous Pruitt temper? I guess, Neville conceded, looking like he couldn't care less. At platform 9 3/4 the next day, Bill and Charlie were having great fun teasing their younger siblings. Except for Percy, who was too busy trying to be a responsible adult and actually working. Clearly this is a sign that Percy hates his family and is just looking for an excuse to throw them over. I might be seeing you all sooner than you think, Charlie said, grinning, as he hugged Ginny goodbye. Why? Fred asked keenly. Are you going to be in Britain for Christmas? Harry asked innocently. Let's go with that, Charlie replied. After all, if it were for any other reason at all, I wouldn't be supposed to say, as it's, what was it? Classified information until such time the Ministry sees fit to release it. Kinda makes you wonder, really, why in the world it's such a big secret. I mean, anyone even vaguely connected with the ministry knows, but the Hogwarts students can't. Harry complained. Charlie eyed him curiously. How do you know Dash? I know everything, Harry said seriously. I thought that was your scar, Hermione said. My scar is a part of me, Harry shrugged. Really? Because when you were claiming that you weren't psychic earlier, Dash, Hermione began. Stop nitpicking, Harry told her, ignoring her outraged gasp and turning back towards the adult Weasley boys. So, you know why I sort of wish I was back at Hogwarts this year, Bill said, looking almost wistful. Why? George asked impatiently. Probably because being an adult sucks, Harry guessed. Although since he's a traveling curse breaker, I don't see why he'd want to go back to Snapper exams. You guys are going to have an interesting year, Bill defended. I might even get some time off to come and watch a bit of it. A bit of what? Ron demanded. Neville shrugged. Who knows? Every year Harry has is pretty interesting, and since no one actually tried to kill Harry last year, except possibly Professor Snape for giving serious ideas, this year should be twice as deadly. How does that even work? Ginny asked quizzically. It's Harry, Neville said, as if that explained everything. Which it kind of did. Thanks for having us stay, Mrs. Weasley, Hermione said. Yeah, thanks for everything, Neville added. Oh, it was my pleasure, dears, said Mrs. Weasley. Oh, sure it's her pleasure when it's Ron's friends, Fred muttered. But when we want to have people over it's always we'll see, George added. Or, when I want to have friends over it's Ron's friends are around your age, or Luna lives right over the hill, Ginny contributed. The twins glared at her for breaking their rhythm. Sorry, it's blatant favoritism, that's what it is, Fred sniffed. Too right, Fred, George agreed. No, it's because last time Lee Jordan came to visit you blew up the house, corrected Mrs. Weasley. We only blew it up a little, Fred insisted. And it's not like you didn't fix it in 5 minutes anyway, George finished. Anyway, Mrs. Weasley sighed. I'd invite you all for Christmas, but, well, I expect you're all going to want to stay at Hogwarts, what with one thing and another. Oh, come on. Ron moaned as they went to go find a compartment. Mum knows, too? She's not even in the ministry. Can't you just tell me what it is, Harry? I could, Harry agreed. But I don't want to. You're not letting them know about the Triwizard Tournament. Luna's ethereal voice came from behind them. Nope, Harry said cheerfully. What's a Triwizard Tournament? Hermione asked, looking a bit irritated not to know when clearly everyone else did. It's a competition that was established 700 years ago between Hogwarts, Beauxbatons, and Durmstrang. A representative from each school is chosen, and the 3 champions compete in 3 magical tasks. Every 5 years, the schools took turns hosting the tournament. Several centuries ago, however, the death toll got to be too high and they cancelled it, Neville explained. Death toll? Hermione asked, horrified. Well, duh. Hermione, Ron said. Think how easy it is to nearly die just by going to Hogwarts even without the extra danger thrown in. That's awful, Hermione whispered. It's a good thing they cancelled it. Didn't you hear Luna?
Harry asked.
They're reinstating it. I'm sure Dumbledore has more sense than that, Hermione said skeptically. I wouldn't bet on it, Harry muttered. It's okay, Harry, Luna told him. One of these days the power of our insanity will prove to be too much for her, and she'll have to believe. I know, Harry nodded. I just wish that day was today. Father says Durmstrang takes a far more sensible line than Hogwarts about the dark arts. Durmstrang students actually learn them, not just the defense rubbish we do, Draco was saying as he entered their compartment, followed by his 2 faithful stooges. Mother put her foot down, though, and said no son of hers would ever be caught dead in a Durmstrang uniform. I can kind of see your point, I'll admit. I mean, who wears fur nowadays, really? Still think of how much fun I could have learning all sorts of dark spells. So, you think Durmstrang would have suited you, do you? Hermione said angrily. I wish you had gone, then we wouldn't have to put up with you. Draco raised an eyebrow. Claws out today, Granger? Are you just sore Durmstrang doesn't accept Muggleborns? No, Hermione denied. Durmstrang has a horrible reputation. According to Appraisal of Magical Education in Europe, it puts a lot of emphasis on the dark arts. That's not exactly a horrible reputation, Neville pointed out. Although the no Muggle-born policy does draw some criticism from the more moderate factions of wizarding society. So, going to enter Weasleys? Draco asked, bored with the discussion of the school he'd chosen not to go to. Going to try to earn a bit of money so you don't have to make Potter buy you everything? Enter what? Ron asked blankly. You don't know? Draco looked amused. Your dad and 3 of your brothers are involved. How can you not know? What about you, Potter? You never miss a chance to show off, after all. Harry shrugged. Probably. I heard they're using an age line to keep anyone under the age of 17 out, but I'm not exactly going to let that stop me. And as for why they don't know, Luna tried to tell them, but they don't believe her. Which is strange, because she's right more often than not. It's because what I say sounds strange, Luna explained. And to quote my favorite cricket player, in an insane world the sane appear insane. How do you know about the tournament? Ginny demanded. Wait, you believe Luna and Harry? Ron asked in disbelief. Ginny nodded. I've known Luna for years, and everyone knows that the crazier the things that come out of Harry's mouth are, the more accurate they get. Point, Neville acknowledged. Oh, my father found out about it ages ago, Draco said airily. He heard about it from Cornelius Fudge. That's against the rules because it's supposed to be secret until the time comes for it to be revealed. Hermione protested. So what your father did, Malfoy, is wrong. Draco stared at her. Do you honestly expect me to care or something? You should, Hermione said defiantly. Draco laughed. My father was accused of being a Death Eater after the Dark Lord fell, and that accusation keeps coming up every time someone doesn't like him. As a wealthy, powerful pureblood, lots of people don't like him. When compared to having your father accused of being a terrorist, do you really think it matters in the slightest if he told me about some stupid tournament a few weeks in advance? It should, Hermione repeated. Whatever, Draco shook his head, leaving the compartment, Crabbe and Goyle following silently behind him. Do you think Goyle even knows how to talk? Harry asked idly. What about Crabbe? Ron asked. I always thought he looked stupider. He may not be the brightest guy around, Harry conceded, remembering how he'd managed to kill himself with fiendfire he really shouldn't have been casting in the first place. But he's not that stupid. Your scar again? Hermione asked skeptically. Maybe, Harry muttered. Hey Luna, Ginny asked suddenly. Do you believe in Harry's psychic scar? Oh no, the blonde girl shook her head. Then how do you explain how he always knows everything? Neville inquired. Luna blinked. He's obviously from the future. Hermione stared at her for half a second before bursting out laughing. That's even less likely than his scar being semi-sentient. Which it totally is, Harry managed to say truthfully since it was a Horcrux and whatnot, while staring at Luna speculatively. What makes you say that? Ginny wanted to know. Well, how else would you explain it? Luna asked reasonably. Chapter 37. So, you're Dennis Creevy then? Harry asked politely, looking at Colin's younger brother. The small boy had never really forgiven him for Colin's death since, according to him, Colin wouldn't have snuck back into Hogwarts in the first place if it hadn't been Harry's decision to have the battle. Harry wasn't entirely sure about that, but since he'd mostly ignored Colin due to sheer annoyance, and he had so obviously idolized him, there was some lingering guilt there. He had already made the effort to be nicer to Colin himself, but he figured it wouldn't hurt to do some work with Dennis, either. Uh-huh, Dennis confirmed, nodding excitedly. I fell off the boat on the way up here, and Colin said the giant squid pushed me back in. Isn't that awesome? That is quite a story, Harry conceded. Of course, my own boat ride was on a nice, calm night without any near drownings, and I think it would have been a much pleasanter experience, but I can't really tell people about it because they don't care. You, however, can use your story to terrify all the little first years for the next 6 years. Dennis' eyes widened in anticipation. Awesome. This is Harry Potter. Dennis, Colin introduced reverently. He's probably insane, but really cool. If you ever get really bored, go find him, and something exciting is sure to follow. It was, Harry reflected as he moved back to his own seat, better than being sought out because of his evil facial disfigurement. I do hope this year's batch of Gryffindors are up to scratch, nearly headless Nick remarked idly. We don't want to break our winning streak, do we? He paused. Of course, that's not bloody likely with Harry here, but it wouldn't do to get overconfident, would it? I just want you to know that I really hate you right now. Harry glared at the insensitive ghost, who looked remarkably unconcerned. If looks could petrify, though. The opening feast was, of course, fantastic, and Harry was fully engrossed in it when he heard Hermione horror-struck screech. Alarmed, Harry's head shot up in time to hear her say, "There are house elves here? Here at Hogwarts?" "Certainly," Nick said, looking surprised at her reaction. "The largest number in any dwelling in Britain, I believe." "Over 100. I've never seen one," said Hermione. "Well, they hardly ever leave the kitchen by day, do they?" said nearly headless Nick. "They come out at night to do a bit of cleaning, see to the fires, and so on." "I mean, you're not supposed to see them, are you? That's the mark of a good house elf, isn't it? That you don't know it's theirs?" Hermione stared at him. "But they get paid," she said. "They get holidays, don't they? And sick leave, and pensions and everything." Neville was beginning to look a little pale. "Careful, Hermione. What you're talking about sounds suspiciously like a union." Hermione looked a little confused as to why that was a bad thing before she remembered the poor boy's boggart. "Oh, sorry," she said apologetically. "But don't they get some kind of compensation for their work?" "They get more work and accommodations," Ginny replied. "And they really don't want anything else." "Dobby does," Hermione insisted. "And Dobby gets paid," Ron pointed out. Hermione looked down at her mostly untouched plate of food, then pushed it away from her in disgust. "I will not be a part of this slave labor," she announced. "You know, you really didn't seem to have a problem with the Weasleys' house elf when you stayed with them over the summer," Harry pointed out. "Or, did you import all your meals?" Hermione flushed. "That's different."
"How?"
Ron asked. "I know that your mother treats Slinky kindly, and she's always so happy," Hermione replied. Knowing it would only make an annoying situation worse, Harry wisely resisted the urge to point out that Slinky's happiness could very well just be a sign of a thorough indoctrination, and Slinky didn't know any better. Instead, he asked, "You really think Mrs. Weasley treats house elves better than Professor Dumbledore?" Seriously. He hired Dobby for real wages, and he was willing to pay quite a bit more than Dobby was willing to accept, so he had to talk him down. If the other elves wanted it, they could get the same deal. Hermione sniffed. "Just because none of you care about social justice, Dash. We talked about this, remember?" Harry interrupted. "Baby steps. Going on a hunger strike won't make the house elves want freedom any quicker, and pushing for immediate emancipation would just freak them out. Instead, you should try studying the laws and policies regarding them and work towards outlawing house elf corporal punishment," he suggested. "Fine," Hermione snapped, realizing that Harry had a good point and reluctantly picking her fork back up. "But for the record, I am not happy about this." Soon, Dumbledore stood up and Harry automatically tuned out the list of rules and tedious announcements. "It is also my painful duty to inform you that the Interhouse Quidditch Cup will not take place this year," Dumbledore was saying when Harry finally tuned back in.
"What?"
Harry burst out loudly. As everyone turned to stare at him, he figured he might as well go for broke. "But my scar said that the Quidditch pitch shouldn't be occupied until around March or so. Surely the Beauxbatons and Durmstrang students coming in for the Triwizard Tournament aren't demanding we cancel our one sport. I mean, for God's sakes, Crumb is a professional Quidditch player." There was a shocked silence, then an outbreak of whispers. Neville groaned. "Harry Potter. Thunderstealer." Harry snorted. "You want to talk about Thunderstealers? What about him?" He pointed to the door, which immediately flung open, revealing what appeared to be Alastor Moody. Harry quietly nudged the twins, who were sitting a few seats down from him. "Hey," he whispered. "I'm feeling mildly paranoid. Can you do me a favor and make sure that's really him?" Fred and George exchanged looks and shrugged. Fred pulled out the Marauders map under the table, muttered the password, and examined it for a moment before wiping it clean again. "Yeah, that's him. Alastor Moody." "Damn," Harry swore. George raised his eyebrows. "That's a bad thing." Harry shook his head. It's unexpected. We like unexpected, Fred told him. Well, I don't, Harry said frankly. I prefer my chaos to be organized. That's such a contradiction of terms, George said, shaking his head sadly. He might be onto something, though, Fred mused thoughtfully. May I introduce our new defense against the dark arts teacher, Professor Moody, Dumbledore said brightly. He paused for a moment. And yes, Hogwarts does have the pleasure of hosting the Triwizard Tournament this year. So thoughtful of Mr. Potter to inform us all. If it had been anyone else, Harry would have bet that the old headmaster would have been annoyed. Seeing as it was him, however, Dumbledore honestly seemed to think he was being considerate.
Typical.
Age line? Fred moaned. What does he mean there's an age line? It's for our own good, really, Angelina told him, smirking. He glared at her. You're only saying that because you're already 17. Angelina crossed her arms unrepentantly. There's got to be a way to beat the age line, George insisted. We've just got to find it. I know how to get past it, Harry spoke up. And I plan on entering. After all, he reasoned, there was still a chance he would be entered since the third task was such a perfect kidnapping opportunity. He didn't think he'd changed anything as far as the tournament itself was concerned, and the third task was traditionally a maze of some sort anyway, so he might as well do it willingly. And since an aging potion wouldn't fool the age line, as it could tell how old you really were, it should be able to tell he was in his 20s and let him by no problem. Obviously, they hadn't thought to do anything to stop people of age from entering people who weren't, but then he supposed that since most people who could enter would, they wouldn't want to lessen their chances by adding more applicants. Now, he only had a month to figure out how to trick the goblet into believing there was a fourth, or fifth, depending on whether one of Voldemort's followers still struck school. Wouldn't that piss everyone off, though, having 3 Hogwarts champions versus 1 Beau's Batons and 1 Durmstrang contestant? He vaguely hoped it wouldn't start an international incident. If it did, oh well. Better that than a Voldemort incident. You do? Fred asked, a little skeptical.
How?
George demanded. Harry smirked.
Now.
That would be telling. 4-5 galleons, I'll be willing to enter anyone who wants me to. Spread the word. Harry always welcomed the chance to hone his BS abilities, and so was quite looking forward to his first divination class. Hermione had dropped at the end of last year, of course, but since she was still taking Muggle studies, the two of them were still using a time turner to get to their one class more than everyone else was taking. Good day, Professor Trelawney greeted them ethereally. She turned to Harry, who was her favorite pupil. Well, she probably would have liked Luna, but the Ravenclaw had opted against taking divination as she felt that the class would be too structured for such a mysterious phenomena as the inner eye. You are preoccupied, my dear, she said mournfully. My inner eye sees past your brave face to the troubled soul within. And I regret to say that your worries are not baseless. I see difficult times ahead for you, alas, most difficult. I fear the thing you dread will indeed come to pass, and perhaps sooner than you think. I know, Harry agreed sadly. I just heard that Ludo Bagman is going to be a judge in the Triwizard Tournament, and he's bet the goblins that I'll win. You aren't even entered, pointed out Neville. Bagman got a great deal, Harry shrugged. So, about that whole you'll enter anyone thing, can you get me in the tournament? Ron asked hopefully. I can get you into the running, Harry confirmed. As long as Hermione doesn't find out, because I don't want to have to deal with her complaining that I'm cheating or some other such nonsense until afterwards. He shuddered. She might even tell on me. Uncool, Ron agreed. So, I'll get you the 5 galleons by next month, and don't even think about trying to give me a best friend's discount, because I already owe you enough. A light, Harry agreed. Neville. The other boy snorted. Please. Why would I want to go up against the finest Hogwarts, Beau's Batons, and Durmstrang has to offer? Because you're stupid? Harry suggested. Neville glared at him. Oh, I didn't mean you, per se. Harry backtracked hurriedly. I just meant, that's why everyone who's not a 6th year, who just barely missed the cutoff like the twins wants to enter. They just won the prize money, and maybe the fame. They're not thinking about the competing against the best of the best, and the chance they could die. Am I right in saying, my dear, that you were born in midwinter? Trelawney's voice cut through their conversation. Well, Harry trailed off. I, personally, was born in July. My scar, however, was born on December 31st. I thought your scar was born on Halloween, Lavender said, puzzled. Oh no, Harry corrected. That's just when I got it. And that, not when it was born? Dean raised an eyebrow quizzically. No, it was born on New Year's Eve, Harry repeated, annoyed. Don't you people listen? We do, Parvati assured him. You just make no sense. What's not to get? Harry demanded. My scar was born on New Year's Eve, and I got it on Halloween. Seems simple enough. You know what? Seamus asked. Never mind. This will not be worth it. I can tell. Spoil sport, Harry muttered bitterly. I can't believe we have so much homework, Ron complained. Just because Trelawney can't take a joke. You told Lavender you wanted to see her anus, pointed out Neville. What did you expect? Hermione, who had been shoveling food into her mouth as quickly as possible, looked up sharply. He said what? Oh, don't you start, Ron said irritably. She already hexed me for it. It's no less than you deserve, Harry told him frankly. You know, in the Muggle world that would be considered sexual harassment, and you could get into all sorts of legal trouble. It was a joke, Ron cried. It was a stupid one, Neville said bluntly. And Ginny heard about it from Parvati. So she's out for your blood as well. Oh, dear God, Ron groaned, burying his head in his arms. I've got to run, Hermione said, standing up. I'm going to the library. I thought you didn't have any homework, Neville said, surprised. I don't. This is for something else, Hermione said evasively, heading towards the exit. Hermione, I should probably warn you that I trademarked spew over the summer, Harry called after her. She stopped, looking a little disappointed. You did?
Why?
I started a grammar Nazi organization. Stop people abusing words, Harry explained. That would be SBAW, now spew, Hermione pointed out. I spelled abusing with an E, Harry grinned. It seemed ironic. And this went over well, with the grammar Nazis? Hermione couldn't believe it. Harry shrugged. It has the Harry Potter name attached to it. Why wouldn't it? Hermione just shook her head and stormed off. No sooner had she left than Fred, George, and Lee Jordan descended upon them. Moody. How cool is he? Fred asked. And still moody, we checked, George added. We had him this afternoon, Lee told Harry, Ron, and Neville. What was he like? Harry asked, honestly curious. He'd never had Moody as a teacher after all, but Crouch was pretty good, and he wanted to know how similar the two teaching styles were. The three older boys exchanged a look full of meaning. Never had a lesson like it, said Fred mysteriously. He knows, man, said Lee. He knows what it's like to be out there doing it, George said, his voice awe-filled. He see it all, said Fred. Amazing, Lee concluded. So, he started a cult then? Harry asked innocently. Chapter 38. Harry might have been looking forward to actual Moody's first class, and he knew it was still actual Moody as he had had the twins checked just that morning. He was having them check so often in fact that they started getting a little annoyed, and so he started paying them making every day so damn epic. If Ron's month got any more tragic, then their professor might just decide that Ron was the student destined to die young from their year that she had somehow missed because he was being overshadowed by Harry, as per usual. Ron, superstitious as he was, would probably believe her, and then they'd have to endure weeks and months of him bemoaning his fate until he might very well die from being strangled to death by his irate friends. Harry glanced over at the twins, who appeared to be plotting. I'm guessing they're planning their future business. Interrupt them at your own risk. No thanks, I'm good here, Ron said quickly. Neville snorted. Finally, he shows some survival instincts. Be fair, Harry deadpanned. He's lived with them all his life. It's more twin instincts than anything. True, Neville agreed solemnly. Hey, Ron protested. I'm finished, Hermione announced, bounding into the common room. She glanced at Ron's paper. You appear to be drowning twice. It's a good thing Dean's a qualified lifeguard then, Ron said amiably. Still, you'd think I'd learn after the first time. Don't you think it's obvious you made this up? Hermione asked. Way to judge, Hermione, Harry huffed. Just because you couldn't last a year in the class doesn't mean you should belittle those of us with actual talent. Hermione glared at him. By your own admission, you have no talent in the class. Ron does, Harry countered. So, Hermione, what's in the box? Neville inquired quickly, preventing a full-blown argument. Funny you should ask, Hermione said, glaring at Harry. She took off the lid and revealed the horribly familiar sight of 50 or so multicolored spew badges. Only they didn't say spew, obviously, since Harry had trademarked it. He should have known better than to hope that that alone was enough to stop Hermione crusade on behalf of house elves. Shoo? Ron asked, confused. Stop hurting our elves, Hermione beamed. You like it? Hermione, no one's going to take an organization called SHOE seriously, Neville said frankly. It's not shoo, it's SHOE, Hermione corrected. Yeah, people aren't going to care, Harry told her. It's easier to just say shoo. Harry didn't really care what scheme Hermione had cooked up to do this and figured he could always get a recap from Neville later. So, will you join? Hermione looked so hopeful that he almost said yes. Then he remembered just how annoying Spew had been and how crazy and idealistic the issue of house elf rights made Hermione. Can I just make a donation? Harry asked instead. Hermione blinked. A donation? Why? Tax cut, Harry said simply. Ron groaned. Again with the tax cuts? Are you obsessed or something? Of course not. Harry denied, highly affronted. But seeing as how I'm the only one of us that actually has to pay taxes, I'm the only one who understands that every little bit counts. I won't get to make SHOE a deduction if I'm a member, because then it will look like it's my own self-interest. You could just hire someone to do your taxes for you, Hermione pointed out. That's what my parents do. Ah, Harry smiled. I could, but I find better loopholes. I'm sure you do, Neville said absently. Now, what would membership of this shoe require us to do? Because I draw the line at bake sales. Hermione nodded. That's fair. How do you feel about knitting? Soon came the defense against the dark arts lesson that Harry had been looking forward to, the chance to purportedly be completely immune to the imperious curse on the first try. Granted, it had really taken him 4, but that sounded much less badass. Isn't that illegal? Hermione protested. I could have sworn someone said something about it being a one-way ticket to Azkaban. Wizarding laws don't really apply to Dumbledore, Harry explained. I mean, what are they going to do? Arrest him? He snorted, remembering when the Ministry had tried exactly that. Good luck. While I wouldn't quite go that far, Moody said neutrally. It's true that no one really wants to nitpick Dumbledore's every action. Nitpick. Hermione couldn't believe it. This isn't nitpicking, this is a curse that's apparently on the same level as brutally torturing someone and as automatically killing them, and we can't just dash. Besides, Moody interrupted her. If you do not wish to do this lesson, the door is that way. Just don't be surprised if a dark wizard uses it on you, and you're completely and totally unprepared and helpless to resist. It's not always used by Death Eaters, you know. Oftentimes it's used for less obvious evil and in conjunction with an oblivious. Gulping, Hermione stayed seated. Harry watched impassively as his classmates were all rendered helpless under the imperious curse's effects. The actions they were doing, imitating a squirrel, hopping around the classroom singing the national anthem, doing some rather impressive gymnastics, ECT, were in and of themselves rather amusing. The underlying implication that his friends and classmates would be utterly defenseless against a dark wizard, or even just a morally challenged one, was not. Finally, it was Harry's turn. Potter, Moody growled. You're next. Harry calmly moved forward to the middle of the classroom. Moody raised his wand and pointed it in Harry's general direction. Imperio. Harry felt the effects of the curse, of course, that blissful, floating feeling. Still, over the years he'd been under it so much. In fact, after the Second War ended, Auror training mandated being put under the imperious curse until you successfully fight it off, and Harry had been put under a few times just to prove that he already could, that he barely noticed the effects. Jump on the desk. Harry sighed theatrically. You know, I really would. In fact, under normal circumstances, I think it would be a great homage to Dead Poets Society. Just the same, I cannot, as a matter of principle, obey any command I receive while under the imperious curse. It just wouldn't be right. Does that mean Harry's fighting off the curse? Hermione wondered. Maybe Moody's just getting creative, Ron suggested. Of course, Harry managed to be immune, Neville groaned. Is anyone honestly surprised? No one said anything. Impressive, very impressive. Until yesterday, I could honestly say I'd never seen someone so resistant to the imperious curse before, Moody said thoughtfully. What happened yesterday? Seamus asked. Moody smiled. Yesterday, I had the third-year Ravenclaws, and one Miss Luna Lovegood didn't even notice I put the curse on her. That sounds about right, Dean agreed. I am so proud, Harry gushed. Luna's great. That's all the time we have for today, Moody announced. Even though no one but Potter managed to beat the Imperius on their first try, repeated usage develops a natural resistance in everyone, so if anyone wants to work with me to build up a resistance, stay after class, and we'll work out a schedule. Needless to say, Harry went down to dinner alone. Chapter 39. When Victor Crumb arrived, along with the rest of the Durmstrang delegation and the representatives of Beauxbatons, he was immediately given the celebrity treatment. Harry, firm in his belief that the rules did not actually apply to him and somewhat sympathetic for the other boy, who had grown up to be a friend of his, meandered over to the Slytherin table and sat across from him. I would introduce myself, but that would probably be as pointless as you introducing yourself, as my scar basically serves as a name tag. Harry greeted. Harry Potter? Crumb inquired. See? Harry beamed. No need for an introduction. Or an invitation, Draco grumbled. Go away, Potter. I was enjoying the look on the weasel's face when he saw me talking to his Quidditch hero. Well, as bad as it would be if it were just you, the fact that I'm not even supposed to be here but came over anywhere should annoy him twice as much, Harry pointed out. Especially considering that he could have easily followed me, but doesn't think he's awesome enough to get away with it. That's because he's not, Draco replied. Why are you here? Crumb asked, inserting himself back into the conversation. Hogwarts is extremely vulnerable to celebrities, Harry confided. Professor Lockhart 2 years ago, and me for the past 3 years are good examples of this. I've found the best way to handle this is to carry an antidote to amortentia. Do not consume anything that is not either sealed or other people eat as well, such as the food in the Great Hall, and that there is no point ignoring the fangirls because not only will it not make them go away, it will just make you seem more mysterious and them that much more determined to win you over. I see, Crumb said, looking a bit dazed. Clearly Durmstrang didn't have Hogwarts' fangirl problem. Or fanboy problem for that matter. Is amortentia really such a problem here? Not so much yet, Harry admitted. But in a few years, when I'm your age here, I always carry a spare. Thank you, Crumb said, accepting the vial Harry held out. Any other advice? Harry considered it for a moment. People are going to be begging you for autographs. I recommend you make a bunch of copies of a photo of yourself, possibly in Quidditch gear, and sign them all. Then carry them around with you so that when you're surrounded by autograph-seeking hordes, they don't slow you down too much. And if you're interested in making a little spending money, you can sell them instead of giving them away. And the students really won't mind, because the fact they have to pay for it makes it seem even more valuable. Like when I sold signed wall scrolls of Harry and Drag, Draco added. Crumb looked a little confused, whether because he didn't know what drag was, or at least the English word for it, or because he didn't understand why Draco would have pictures of that. Harry wasn't sure. It was a boggart, he said quickly. And it occurred to me that since I trademarked my name, I could totally sue you for selling those without my permission. But by the time you realized that you were getting a cut of the profits, Draco pointed out. And do you really want another lawsuit on your hands when you've got the tournament to worry about? I suppose not. Harry grudgingly conceded. You plan to enter the Triwizard Tournament? Crumb asked, surprised. It's not like I've got much of a choice in the matter, so I prefer to be proactive, Harry said brightly. But the age line, Crumb reminded him. Draco snorted. Like that will stop him. If anyone can find a way around that, Harry can. I wish I was back at Durmstrang, Crumb confessed. That's a common first reaction, Harry assured the international Quidditch sensation. I feel accomplished, Harry declared the next day as he sat down to the Halloween feast. Neville looked frightened.
What did you do this time?
Harry still couldn't get over the fact that there was someone who considered him scarier than Snape. Seriously, who was the ex-Death Eater with the power to fail them anyway? I managed to convince about 75% of the non-Hufflepuff Hogwarts population to bet that Cedric Diggory will not be the Hogwarts champion. I fully intend to make a killing tonight. Apparently Voldemort's got people convinced that you have to be ugly to be powerful, and if the fangirls are any indication, Cedric is really pretty. You mean you didn't enter? Hermione asked, surprised and ignoring the rest of what Harry had said. She hadn't heard of Harry's scheme to charge anyone who was underage and wanted a chance to enter, but she didn't know Harry. Oh no, I did, Harry assured her. And you don't think you'll win? Ron asked, unable to believe Harry had voiced something that could possibly be construed as doubt in himself. Of course I'll win. Who do you think I am? Harry asked, a little self-mocking. But then how can Cedric dash? Hermione continued. Now, that would be telling, Harry said with a grin. You'll see soon enough. Throughout the entire feast, Hermione kept pressing him for details, but Harry stayed mum. It was more fun to watch her get all worked up anyway. At last, Dumbledore stood up. Well, the goblet is almost ready to make its decision. I estimate that it requires 1 more minute. Now, when the champions' names are called, I would ask them to please come up to the top of the hall, walk along the staff table, and go through into the next chamber, where they will be receiving their first instructions. As he finished speaking, the flames in the goblet suddenly turned red and sparks began to fly from it. A moment later, a tongue of flames spat out a charred piece of parchment. The champion for Durmstrang will be Victor Krum, Dumbledore read. After the applause had died down and the champion had disappeared into the waiting room, another piece of parchment was expelled. The champion for Beauxbatons is Fleur Delacour, the international Quidditch star the whole school's obsessed with, and the Vila girl that's driving all the boys mad, Hermione muttered. Why am I not surprised? I don't think Karkaroff even let his other students enter, Harry whispered back. He probably wouldn't have even brought them if he didn't need someone to row the boat. Are they crying? Ron asked, eyeing 2 of the rejected Beauxbatons delegation. No wonder they didn't win. That is so not champion behavior. For once I'm with Ron, Neville said, starting to look a little frightened again. The Hogwarts champion is Cedric Diggory, Dumbledore read off a piece of line paper. Harry felt a little pleased to see such blatant proof of the changes he was bringing. He'd started the whole Muggle school supplies thing on a whim, and now everyone was doing it. Hooray for fads. Of course, having just made quite a bit of money in bets, he was almost as happy as the Hufflepuffs. Well, as the Hufflepuffs before he totally stole their thunder in a few seconds. Excellent. Dumbledore called happily. Well, now that we have our 3 champions for our Triwizard tournament, we can dash. He was cut off as another parchment shot forth from the fire. The champion for the Salem Witches Academy is Harry Potter. There was a moment of silence. Harry, naturally, felt compelled to break it with a Witches Academy? God, my life sucks. The teachers looked upset, but the students looked more amused than anything. Most of them had figured that Harry would get himself entered, but for an all-girls school? Well, except for the Hufflepuffs, they looked pissed. Then the goblet spat out a 5th name, this one again on lined paper. Fred Weasley is the champion for the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, Dumbledore read automatically. Hoo-hoo, Fred yelled, jumping to his feet and high-fiving George and Lee. Come on, Harry, let's go meet with our fellow champions. Harry dutifully got up and started following him, trying to ignore the fact that the Hufflepuffs looked downright murderous now that Gryffindor, and Harry in particular, had managed to upstage them not once, but twice in less than 5 minutes. Just before Harry disappeared into the waiting room with the rest of the champions, he heard Neville remark casually, You know, Hermione, I could be wrong, but I could have sworn Ron predicted something like this would happen last year. What is it? Fleur asked immediately. Do they want us back in the halls? I doubt it, Fred said glibly. In fact, this may take quite a while to sort out. Fred Weasley, 5th champion, at your service? 5th champion? Krum repeated, puzzled. But this is the Triwizard Tournament. Not anymore, it's not, Fred shrugged. Why are you so surprised? Harry asked. I told you I was entering last night. I assumed you meant you were entering as a Hogwarts student, Crumb replied. And deprive Cedric of his precious chance for glories? Harry asked rhetorically. The Hufflepuffs would kill me. They might kill you anyway now that you sneaked 2 Gryffindors into the tournament, Cedric pointed out. True, Harry acknowledged. But at least I didn't steal your chance to compete. And remember what you promised me about getting the hell out of any random graveyards you may find yourself in? Yes, somehow I doubt they will see it that way, Cedric said dryly. Are you two the last champions, or will we be getting representatives from Ravenclaw and Slytherin, too? No, I figured 5 people was more than enough for a 3-person tournament, Harry replied. 3 people are enough for a 3-person tournament, Fleur insisted. You have no imagination, Harry said, looking at his future sister-in-law sadly. Just then, the room was set upon by Luna and several adults. Ludo Bagman, Crouch, Moody, Snape, Dumbledore, Madame Maxiff, Karkaroff, McGonagall, Sirius, and Lockhart. So why are you here again, Gilderoy? McGonagall was asking. I'm here in my official capacity of headmaster, Lockhart explained with his trademark smile. Snape snorted. You? Headmaster? Of what? The Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, of course, Lockhart explained. And as you can see, my champion is right here. Harry, it's been too long. Harry looked a little embarrassed. Actually, I was entered under an American school. Fred here is your champion. Lockhart peered intently at Fred. I remember you, he said finally. Your joke shop will be a huge hit, I can tell. Fred beamed proudly and instantly revised his opinion of his mother's celebrity crush. I can't believe you never told me you were a witch, Harry, Sirius said, sounding wounded. I'm your godfather. You're supposed to tell me these things. Well, maybe I would have if you hadn't cruelly abandoned me for most of my life while you went off living it up in Majorca, Harry shot back. I said I was sorry. I thought he was in Azkaban. Madame Maxime sounded confused. He rewrote his personal history, Moody explained. Just go with it. This will probably already taken far longer than it should. Can I rewrite my history? Karkaroff sounded hopeful, no doubt thoroughly fed up by everyone always bringing up his Death Eater past. No, Moody's answer was blunt. But he did. Karkaroff pouted. He doesn't have a dark mark, Moody replied. That really was an unfortunate tattoo choice, Luna sympathized. What is SHE doing here? Fleur demanded, pointing at Luna. If she is the 6th Triwizard champion, then I am leaving now. Magical contract or no? Oh, no, I didn't enter, Luna said innocently. I was just talking with Headmaster Lockhart about doing my 3rd year at the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness. He said that was fine, but since the student body was spending the year at Hogwarts because of the tournament, I would need to continue classes with the Ravenclaws. How is it, Dumbledore, that you get 3 Hogwarts champions? 2 would be bad enough, but with 3 or over half the competition, Karkaroff demanded. Technically, only Cedric is a Hogwarts champion, Fred pointed out. I'm from the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, and Harry's from Salem's Witches Academy. He burst into laughter again at that. So it's not bad enough that I have to be American, I have to be witch too? Harry complained. Someone up there hates me. You probably deserve it, Sirius said supportively. But hey, at least we went to Las Vegas over the summer. Imagine how much it would suck if you had to be an American girl and didn't even manage that. True, Harry conceded. Regardless of what school you were entered under, you are still students of Hogwarts. Karkaroff burst out. And we were under the impression that your age line would keep out your younger students, Madame Maxime added. I do not know how old the red-haired boy is, but the other one is clearly far too young for G's. You're just jealous you didn't figure out a way to beat the system, Harry said flatly. If we had been able to enter those who were not of age, we would, of course, have brought along a wider selection of candidates from our own schools, Karkaroff said, his eyes cold. Not as cold as Draco's moms were whenever Harry saw her, but cold nonetheless. What? So you think a 4th year is such a threat you'd need to bring along other students to even it out? And whatever happened to all that faith in Crumb? Harry wondered rhetorically. Do not go around blaming Dumbledore for Potter's determination to break rules, Snape ordered softly. He's been crossing lines ever since he arrived here. To be fair, lines have been crossing me right back, Harry defended himself. Did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire, Harry? Dumbledore asked calmly. Yes, Harry admitted. But I was also framed. Potter, do you actually listen to yourself before you speak? McGonagall asked wearily. You did it, but you were also framed? Very rarely, Harry answered. But while it is true that I entered myself under the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, I think my reaction, as well as the fact that it's a girls' school and my name was entered on parchment when God knows I haven't used that since the beginning of second year, clearly shows that I did not enter under Salem Witches Academy. Or you could just be trying to throw us off the track, Snape pointed out. I could, I guess, Harry agreed. But given the amount of flack I'll have to take about being a teenage American witch, which would make me a walking cliché, it would so not be worth it. The rules state that whosever name comes out of the goblet has to compete, so there's really no point arguing about it, Crouch said, looking very much like he'd like to leave. I want to know how he managed to cross the age line, Madame Maxime insisted. Unless Dumbledore made a mistake? Dumbledore did not make a mistake, McGonagall snapped. It is possible, Dumbledore said politely. No, he didn't, Harry assured them. I'm just more creative than that. I would tell you how I did it, but then you'll cover your bases next time, and I think that if anyone else were to have need to get past an age line and stumble across my method for doing so, they deserve to be able to use it in peace. After all, time travel was kind of extreme if you just wanted to enter a lousy competition. If someone went through all that trouble anyway, let them enter. I insist on resubmitting the names of all my students, Karkaroff spoke up. I want 2 more students, and I'm sure Madame Maxime wants them as well. The French headmistress nodded her assent. The goblet won't be relit until the next tournament, Bagman said uncomfortably. So you really can't enter anymore. And you can't leave, either, because Crumb is bound to compete. I love it how no one seems to care that someone entered me into a highly dangerous competition for an unknown purpose, Harry complained as he watched the adults argue. It's the Nargles that make them quibble about fairness, and how could this happen, and ignore the more pressing question of why, Luna confided. Good thing there's no mistletoe, or we wouldn't have gotten past. How can there be 5 students for a Triwizard tournament? Harry said gratefully. Perhaps they are not concerned because you wanted to enter anyway, Lockhart suggested. Or because they are horribly negligent. Whichever, Harry shrugged. And hey, you should really have a talk with Crumb while you're here. He doesn't really seem to have any idea how to manage his fame. Lockhart looked thoughtful. And as an international Quidditch sensation surrounded by hormonal teenagers, that could definitely cause problems. Yes, I will need to speak with him at some point. How long are you going to be here anyway? Harry asked. According to the rules, as headmaster of a competing school, I get to be a judge, so I should be around on and off all year, Lockhart announced. Thanks again for giving me this opportunity to get more good press. Don't mention it, Harry said magnanimously. If it were any other student potentially in danger, they would probably be highly concerned, Sirius theorized. But you go after trolls because you're bored. That was only the one time, Harry protested. Chapter 40. The few days saw the reemergence of the Support Cedric Diggory, the real Hogwarts champion badges. Unlike last time, however, they were created by Harry to try and prevent confusion about whether or not there were 1 or 3 Hogwarts champions. Of course, Harry had to use Colin as a proxy to sell the badges to the Hufflepuffs, as it was far too soon to expect them to be able to speak to him for any length of time without attempting to hex him. And Draco was taking a great deal of delight in proving that Harry was a witch all along through his Harry and Drag wall scrolls, whose sales really started to pick up. It really made Harry wonder how being Draco's friend was all that different from being his enemy, but then, he's supposed to be fair, he had set the tone for their relationship 3 years ago with that widely believed rumor. Harry, have you contacted your headmaster yet? Luna asked him seriously. My headmaster? No. Was I supposed to see Dumbledore about something? Harry asked, trying to remember.
No.
The headmaster, or headmistress, more likely, or Salem Witches Academy, Luna clarified. You're entitled to representation too, you know. Is Salem even a real school? Harry asked, surprised.
Of course it is, Luna replied.
So that means you haven't then? I have no idea who the head person is, Harry confirmed. Do you mind if I write to them then?
Luna asked.
They really should be informed, even though I'm not really a student? Harry asked. Even though you're not a student, Luna agreed. Because for the sake of the tournament, you're an honorary student anyway. Feel free, Harry told her. Thanks, Luna beamed. Now, did you see that the tournament made the Quibbler? Second page. 2. No, I didn't, Harry admitted. Did you write it? Of course, Luna said, handing him the most recent edition of her father's newspaper. I was an eyewitness. Harry Potter Ruins Triwizard Tournament by Luna Lovegood. The former Triwizard Tournament, now the Pentawizard Playoffs, in which Victor Crumb is confused, Fleur Delacour is uptight, Cedric Diggory is complacent, Frederick Forge Weasley is awesome, and Harry Potter has the sex change they had planned for Ronald Weasley, younger brother to Frederick Weasley, last year. In related news, Sirius Black is being temporarily placed into the London prison system because he cruelly abandoned his godson Harry Potter for most of his life while Sirius Black went off living it up in Majorca. He is expected to be released before his godchild returns from boarding school and is legally required to attend bi-weekly meetings discussing the dangers of child abuse. More on page 6, as well as 27 uses for Jell-O that you never would have thought of, 29 for orange. Interesting title, Harry remarked. It's not very flattering, though. Well, you did ruin any chance of this being a Triwizard Tournament when you entered Fred, even though you did not enter yourself, Luna pointed out. True, Harry acknowledged. Pentawizard Playoffs, I like it. That's good, Luna told him, seeing as how I petitioned to get the tournament renamed. Did it work? Harry asked. Pending approval from Fudge, Luna answered. I have a meeting with him after lunch today. What's this about Sirius being placed in prison? Harry asked. I don't recall that happening. I've heard it said many a time that a school is a prison, and he will be here until you go home for the holidays, Luna explained. Besides, we can't very well let him get away with cruelly abandoning you. Now can we? You do realize he was actually in Azkaban, right? Harry asked. Not legally he wasn't. I checked, Luna said simply. And as there is no paper or magical trail to follow, we must simply accept him at his word. Besides, why would he lie about such a horrible thing? Why indeed? Harry mused. Of course, his friends were all varying degrees of supportive. Ron was a little annoyed that he didn't win, but fortunately this time since Fred won he could direct his jealousy there. George was also a bit miffed that he wasn't chosen but realized that only one of them could be picked, and so the two were spending quite a bit of time plotting how to get around that little technicality. Hermione was completely unsympathetic to Harry's plight of suddenly finding out he was an American girl as he apparently deserved it, or some other such nonsense for creating his own school and entering it into the competition without telling anyone. Neville just seemed resigned to the whole thing, and Harry wasn't entirely sure that he believed him about being framed. Cedric knew Harry was bound to enter and bound to win, and so was just glad that he got a chance to compete as well, but was a little overwhelmed by how much his already considerable popularity had risen, and had taken to joining Crumb for Lockhart's impromptu fame lessons. As for Draco, well. So, how long do you think you're going to last, Potter? 10 minutes into the first task's my bet, Draco said confidently while they were waiting for Care of Magical Creatures to start. 10 minutes, huh? Harry repeated. That's actually not bad. I was hoping I'd finish a little sooner, but unexpected delays happen all the time, and I'll probably get more support from the crowd if I take longer. That's not what I meant, Harry, and you know it. Draco insisted. I know nothing of the sort, Harry denied. Harry was spared any further attempts of Draco's to convince him when Hagrid started the lesson with the words, "Walk the Scruts." Naturally, Harry claimed allergies and decided to talk with Hagrid instead. So, you're competent, Harry. In the playoffs. School champion, Hagrid said seriously. Looked like Luna got Fudge's approval after all. Yeah, I don't mind that so much as the school, Harry said, sighing heavily. I am never going to live this down, I swear. No idea who put you in ferret, Harry? Hagrid asked anxiously. Honestly, no, Harry confessed. My leading suspect is Barty Crouch Jr., but I just don't see how he could have done it. Isn't he dead? Hagrid blinked. Oh, who even knows? Harry asked rhetorically. The night before the weighing of the wands, Harry simply handed Dobby his wand and told him to go crazy. While he wasn't entirely sure it was legal for Dobby to be handling it, he did a far better job polishing it than Harry would have bothered to do, and he didn't want to embarrass himself again. "You're late," Cedric said when he arrived. "Sorry, Snape was trying to poison me," Harry said, not sounding apologetic at all. "Really?" Fred said, sounding impressed. "He didn't try to poison us until 5th year," George elaborated. "Yeah, well, we were supposed to be working with antidotes, and I turned in a Bezoar again," Harry said, shrugging. "It's kind of expensive, but the look on his face and the fact that he can't technically fail me because the assignment was to find a way to save someone from the various poisons makes it all worth it." "That are you doing here?" Crumb asked Fred, eyeing him suspiciously. "I'm a champion," Fred explained. "You may have missed it with all the excitement going on Halloween, but that excitement was actually caused by Harry and my name coming out of the goblet." "Then what are you doing here?" Fleur addressed herself to George. "Moral support," George deadpanned. "I hear there's going to be a reporter here. Not to mention that he's not leaving my side until our mother's howler comes," Fred added. "Are you sure you can't just tell us how you managed to defeat it, Harry?" "Sorry," Harry apologized. "Long-held family secret. I would if I could, believe me. You're the only member of your family," Fred pointed out. "Yes, but I have a seat in the Wisengamot I may eventually get around to claiming, and as the last in a long line of purebloods, I have family privileges like that," Harry explained. "Coincidentally, that's also how I got out of explaining how I managed to enter my school into the tournament." Harry didn't complain when Rita Skeeter pulled him into the broom cupboard and valiantly resisted making any sort of comments about how he was a bit young for this. It wouldn't do to anger Rita before her article came out, now would it? "You won't mind, Harry, if I use a quick quotes quill? It leave me free to talk to you normally," Rita informed him. "No, that's fine," Harry assured her, taking out one of his own. "I suppose you won't mind if I use one as well? Just a precaution, you see, in case the article is libel and I have to sue." Rita paled slightly, and Harry could only imagine the direction of her article was rapidly changing. "So, Harry, what made you decide to enter the Pentawizard playoffs?" "I was actually framed," Harry explained. "Surely you don't think I would enter as a female contestant willingly, do you? I'm a teenage boy, and I've heard that that means I have a very sensitive self-esteem right now, and this probably won't help." "So, you're denying your involvement?" Rita asked skeptically. "I didn't say that," Harry countered. "I did enter under my own school, the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness, but I was beaten out by Fred Weasley." "I've never heard of the Harry Potter School of Awesomeness," Rita told him. "Well, it's a new school," Harry admitted. "If you want to know more, I suggest you ask Headmaster Lockhart." "Oh, believe me, I will," Rita said, sounding gleeful. Lockhart was always game for an interview, but she had to be careful because his lawyers were some of the best in the business. "By the way," Harry said, glancing down at Rita's notes, "I would prefer you use striking instead of ugly to describe my scar." "That's fine," Rita said agreeably, and the quill crossed out and replaced the word accordingly. "Now, why did you decide to enter?" "I wanted to challenge myself," Harry answered. "It's a dangerous world out there, and trouble seems to just seek me out. I half thought that I would have to compete anyway, so I entered myself to try and prevent that. Obviously, it didn't work." "It's the same end result, though," Rita pointed out. "How do you feel about the tasks ahead?" "I'm okay with them. I have full faith in the Hogwarts educational system," Harry said with a straight face. "Actually, a bigger concern of mine is why in the world, if the tasks are spread throughout the year, we couldn't have had a Quidditch Cup this year. It's a travesty, really." "What's this? Do I smell a scandal?" Rita asked, looking excited. "It very well might be," Harry said neutrally. "You really should look into that. Champions have died in the past, haven't they?" Rita moved on to her next question. "Have you thought about that at all?" "A little," Harry lied. Hell, he warned Cedric practically every time he encountered the other boy. But people have also had killing curses shot at them in the past, and I got away with a lightning bolt. Not a bad trade-off, really. I think I may actually be immune to death. Immune to death? Rita repeated incredulously. Well, I haven't managed to die yet, have I? Harry asked rhetorically. Despite the best efforts of half the people I know, how would you see looking death in the face before has affected you? Rita inquired. Well, if most people had faced half the things I have, they would probably have a nervous breakdown, Harry theorized. I'd say I'm rather blasé about the whole thing myself. When almost dying becomes a habit, you really don't worry about it much. Do you think that the trauma in your past might have made you keen to prove yourself? To live up to your name? Do you think that perhaps you were tempted to enter the Pentawizard playoffs because, No, not really, Harry interrupted. In fact, I'm rather indifferent as to what Wizarding Society as a whole thinks, so I really just did this for my own sake. Can you remember your parents at all? Rita pressed. You do realize I was only 15 months old when they died, right? Harry asked. Is that a no then? Rita wanted to know. Of course it's a no, Harry said. And, before you ask, I think my dad would be proud of me and my mom would have killed me for doing something so stupid. This interview is over. With that, Harry threw open the door to the broom cupboard just as Dumbledore was about to open it. Hey, Mr. Ollivanders? Harry asked once Fleur, Fred, and Crumb had had their wands checked. How is it that you can cast spells with all of these wands, and yet I merely touched half of the wands in your store? They started destroying things? I would suspect it is because you are a menace to society, Ollivander replied absently. Your wand, please, Mr. Diggory? Harry opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again when he realized it was true. It's in fine condition, Ollivander was saying as he turned Cedric's wand over in his hands. You treat it regularly? Polished it last night, Cedric said, grinning. The twins and Harry exchanged a look before they burst out laughing. Cedric looked puzzled for a second before he got it and rolled his eyes. Is a little maturity too much to ask for from Pentawizard playoff champions? Hey, I'm only 14, Harry defended. Well, physically. True, Cedric acknowledged. What's their excuse? They're Fred and George, Harry said as if it were obvious. They don't need one. Thank you for joining us at Grimoire Audiobooks. We've just wrapped up Part 4, Chapters 31 to 40 of Harry Potter and the Masters of Time by Sarah 1281. The twists, the humor, and the time-bending escapades continue to keep us all on the edge of our seats. If you're as enchanted as we are, let's make some magic happen. Once this video reaches 25 likes and 25 comments, we'll bring you the next and final part of this incredible journey. Your engagement helps us share more of these captivating tales with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Together, let's continue exploring the vast world of stories, one audiobook at a time. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Grimoire Audiobooks family. Stay magical, and we'll see you for the grand finale.